Call to order the regular council meeting for Tuesday, May 4th at 7 p.m. via teleconference. And we acknowledge that we are conducting our business today on the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. As a council, we recognize the importance of doing our best to build respectful relationships that contribute to stewarding the land and waters in our community, in all our communities, with integrity and consideration for future generations. And with that, we'll call for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Gamble, those in favor? Opposed, motion carries, nothing added. And the adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of April 20, 2021. Councillor McKenzie and Councillor, somebody else must have read them. Councillor Reid, there's our omission. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, if I could?
Yes.
They're actually at the adoption of the agenda. If we could go back to that item, we have a request. Item 11.1 on the agenda, which is the crossing agreement covenant. We need to have council consider that item prior to item 9.1 on the agenda. So the reasoning is this is a covenant. They're both for the same properties for Crystal Waters. So council needs to consider the encroachments that are on the property prior to the development permit.
So 11.1.
To immediately preceding 9.1.
Right. Noted change. I'll need a resolution to make that change. We could put about it. Councillor McKenzie?
I'll move it.
Councillor Koza, got your hand up. Those in favor of switching 11.1 to just before 9.1? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. So noted, so changed. And the report from me, the regional district highlights were enumerated. The Okanagan Basin Water Board this morning had some considerable discussion because it was with the Stewardship Council as well, and they were doing great guns on source protection and sustainability for water, doing all sorts of looking at drought conditions and looking at what to do with forest fires in our watershed, and we need more mitigation done. We'll get on to some of those. The announcements, the BC COVID-19 Speak survey is that BC asks you to share your experience with the pandemic over the past year by participating in the COVID-19 Speak survey. The survey may be found at bccdc.ca/COVID-19 survey. So that would be on our web for people who can find our web and get to the survey. And May is Building Safety Month. The month that district's Facebook page will share information about building safety issues. It is important to know that getting a building permit protects the public by reducing hazards of unsafe construction and ensuring public health, safety, and welfare. Following the BC Building Code minimum standards of safety is crucial. So be sure you do that in terms of our buildings. And thirdly, surprise, surprise, The Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators has awarded a 10-year award to our former CFO and current CAO, Tanya Groth, for award recognizes and celebrates her dedication to public service and municipal management for the previous 10 years. So thank you very much and congratulations, Tanya. Not a finance award this time, but a management one anyway. So good on you. No delegations, no bylaws following the public hearing. We're set for public comment. If anybody wishes to address council, now is their time to do it, but there is a bit of delay if anybody's phoning in. I don't know if Raina is around. Anybody phoning, Raina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no calls on the line at this time.
Okay, so we'll jump to 11.1 then. And it's the crossing agreement covenant. Somebody doing that? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, here we are. Evening, Mayor and Council. It was brought to my attention I forgot to introduce myself last time I was in front of you all. So my name's Evan Smith. I'm an engineering technician with the Engineering and Environmental Services Department. Nice to see everyone again. Let me pop up my presentation. Okay, so good evening all. We're here to discuss an encroachment onto district road dedication adjacent to 18263 Crystal Waters Road and 6 adjoining properties. The district is seeking council's direction prior to advancing the owner's DP and DVP application. The subject property is located on the east side of Crystal Waters Road, south of the Crystal Waters Strata subdivision. A previous dwelling was demolished in late 2019 and is proposed to construct a new on-site driveway. After investigation, staff found that 18263 and 6 adjoining properties were using a shared driveway, which access encroaches onto district road dedication. Crystal Waters Road shares a 110-meter wide dedication with the BC MOTI. The ministry has no concerns with the district's proposal to register crossing agreement covenants on title with the 7 properties. The existing encroachment outlined in red includes 100 meters of shared driveway. Pictures of the
No.
Sorry.
You seen that somewhere? I don't see a screen with red on it.
You're not sharing your screen.
I was just texting Todd. I asked him if he was not seeing it because I'm not seeing it. I have it open over here, but I don't see it in front of me.
Sorry, everybody.
Now we see it.
Oh,
Wow,
dokey.
should I just restart?
Yeah.
So here's the subject property at 18263 Crystal Waters. The 7 properties are also highlighted in green. Here's a slide we were on, the existing encroachment of the 100-meter shared driveways outlined in red. So this is from a site inspection from November 2020. The houses accessing the encroachment are built at such an elevation that the individual driveways would not be able to meet current highway access and driveway bylaw standards. The notable area of encroachment is the 4-meter wide paved driveway. The southern 4 of 7 homes utilize 20 meters of the shared driveway encroaching on district road dedication. The 3 of the 7 homes to the north utilize the remainder 100 meter long driveway encroachment. Staff requires council's direction in answering the following question. Does council wish to permit the continued unauthorized encroachment of the shared driveway in the district road dedication on Crystal Waters Road? So due to new information recently submitted, the following option A has been amended to focus on the paved driveway portion. Option A resolution is that the owners of 18263 be permitted to continue the use of the 100-meter shared driveway encroachment on the district road dedication, subject to the applicant registering a crossing agreement covenant on title and obtaining a building permit from the district. And that staff be authorized to enter crossing agreement covenants with the remaining 6 property owners using the noted 100-meter shared driveway encroachment. Option B would be that the owners of the property of 18263 be permitted to continue the use of the 100-meter shared driveway encroachment without entering into a crossing agreement with the district. Option C, the owners of the property at 18263 would be directed to remove the encroachment within the district's road dedication. If council chooses option C, the development permit and DVP for the subject property would need to be referred back to staff because the removal of the encroachment would significantly impact the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to open up the floor now.
Oh, it's not done yet? Sorry.
Oh, no, this is an opportunity for questions.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody?
James, I've had my hand up for a little while.
Oh, okay. Sorry, can you take your screen down now?
Yes, I can.
And then I can see the councillors. I'm not sure.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Evan, for that presentation. But can you, the one thing that wasn't very clear in the reports that we went through is where exactly the district in the encroachment is on the district property, and that that last one you just showed sort of circles around the road, but it doesn't go right to the road. So I'm just a little confused with exactly where the encroachment is, because we're going to be talking about retaining walls here, and I just want to know if we're dealing with the retaining wall in the district road.
Yeah, no problem. I'll share my screen here. I'll close in on the GIS. You can see property lines along here, and you can see the entrance to the 7 sites we're questioning.
Okay, so all that's district property then?
Yeah, inside this 110-meter wide dedication, which we share with the BC MOTI. So
Okay.
Here's the entrance off of Crystal Waters Road.
Okay, so that retaining wall, if you go farther down to where it says Crystal Waters Road, the second one, yeah, right there.
Yes.
There's so where you were just before, keep going.
Mhm.
There's retaining wall there. So I'm just curious, that retaining wall right there, that's in district property then? Because it looks like it's half and half.
Yeah, there's a lock block retaining wall here, and then there is a large stone retaining wall which carries along Crystal Waters Road, or the lower Crystal Waters Road.
Yes.
New information that's come to light at the very end of last week and the start of this week. We decided to focus only on the shared driveway portion. We're gonna look into the construction of this lower Crystal Waters Road just to make sure we know the sequence of events and who constructed and who maintains that retaining wall portion.
Okay, because that's, you know, when we're looking at the next file, it's going to require them to access that next part. It'd be nice to know exactly, you know, when we open this thing up, how exactly that's going to be affected with this. So I just wanted to make sure I seen exactly what was in district land and what we're dealing with on their property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I got my hand up, James.
All right. Oh, yes. Carry on, Bill, or Councillor Scarrow.
Thanks very much. And Blair, I think, has got his hand up too.
After him, after you. Yeah.
Looking out for my buddy there.
Hmm.
Thanks, buddy. Anyway, I was down there today, of course, as we all were at one point, I'm sure. And that's a real can of worms there. The thing that I would like to share with the rest of councillors that I happen to know is I was talking to a gentleman who moved there in 1962, and he's the new guy. The other people that have been there historically for over 40 or 50 years. So what's happened there happened when laws and bylaws and restrictions and codes were all much more lax. Then Club Cal came along, or Crystal Waters Development there, and he suggests the fellow I was talking to suggests that the rock wall that goes on that portion down to the southern properties there was actually developed by Crystal Waters subdivision, Dennis, whatever his last name is, and all of their services for those 50 homes down below are behind that wall. And one of the recommendations, I see they've crossed it out now, they've decided not to deal with that retaining wall, was the fact that these 6 or 7 property owners do not want to become liable for a stone wall constructed by a development company or by the district, they're not sure who, that holds all of this infrastructure for that development down below. So those 7 properties don't want to be liable for that, and I completely agree, that makes sense. But there's so many different, as Todd pointed out, land encroachments going on down there and things like that, that I think what it says in one of the reports I read is really the parties should just get together, talk about this and figure out something that works without causing an uprooting of a 50-year-old problem. And I think that's where we're at today. I think that Evan might agree. Either that or he's a bobblehead. So that's what I have to say about it.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So now that the retaining walls have been removed from this, and you said that they're going to be investigated some more, is there going to be, I mean, because they're on our property, so at some point, is this going to be revisited that we're going to talk about an encroachment agreement for those walls as well?
That's right. We're going to be investigating the current maintenance of the lower Crystal Waters Road, who maintains that paved roadway. It may come to light that we will inherit the responsibility of that retaining wall, or it may be the responsibility of the Crystal Waters subdivision, or we may bring it back to be responsible for the responsibility of the 7 properties down below. We just wanted to focus on the shared paved driveway at this point, and we'll really hash out the life cycle and how this retaining wall was born.
No, well, that's good. I'm glad that we're not just burying that. I would hate to see us be responsible for those retaining walls. I would absolutely hate to see that. You know, we have no idea what's behind them, how they're built, and you know, there's been a few. You know, there might be a few people that have lived there for a long time, but there's a few new houses in that area, and a few older houses. So. And the new houses are quite large, and I would suggest those older houses are going to disappear and be replaced by more monster houses, like one of the properties here now. So, yeah, that's good. I just wanted to make sure that was still on the agenda, that we had an encroachment agreement going forward on those retaining walls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So this is the costing agreement that our covenant that we're entering into for this file right now. So I need a resolution from council to A, B, or C, and A preferably. Councillor Scarrow?
Move option A, sir.
Thank you. A seconder? Councillor Gamble? Any further discussion? Those in favor?
I am.
Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to 9-1 now. I think that's where we're. Yep. And there's development variance.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Tamara Rogers, and I'm a planner in the Planning and Development Department. The application is DP 2020-001 and DVP 2021-008 related to the properties at 18263 and 18281 Crystal Waters Road. The properties are within the rural residential future land use designation of the official community plan and the RR3 zone. The development permit is for a house and 2 accessory buildings at 18263 Crystal Waters Road within the hillside, natural environment, and greenhouse gas reduction and resource conservation development permit areas. And I want to make it clear that the development permit is for 18263 Crystal Waters Road only. The development variance permit is for overheight retaining walls at 18263 and 18281 Crystal Waters Road. And these retaining walls cross over the property line between the 2 properties. So this is why these 2 properties are the subject of this DVP. I wanted to let council know that the applicant and the property owners are available this evening should council have any questions for them. No letters have been received. However, 5 letters of support were received from neighboring property owners and were submitted with the original application package. These letters were included as an attachment to the council report. Before I move on with the rest of my presentation, it was brought to staff's attention that a member of council has concerns with the notification signage on the property. Staff reviewed the signage and determined that it was not installed per staff's directions nor the requirements of the development application procedures bylaw. The procedures bylaw requires 1 sign to be installed per property on the frontage of the property, which is Crystal Waters in this case. So 1 sign should have been posted at 18263 on the frontage, and the other should have been posted at 18281 Crystal Waters. The signs should also have been installed on posts between 1 meter and 1.5 meters high. As council can see from the pictures in this presentation, the signs were installed low to the ground, and rather than 1 per property on the frontage, one sign was installed on Crystal Waters frontage at 18263, and then the other was installed on the rail trail on the same property. However, all property owners to the north of the subject properties that access their properties from that access road where the sign was placed, they all submitted letters of support. Therefore, they are already aware of the proposed variance, and an additional sign on 18281 Crystal Waters Road would not likely have provided any additional benefit. The sign also clearly shows that both properties are the subject of the development variance permit application. However, when reviewing the signs and notification requirements today, it came to light that the property at 18331 Crystal Waters Road, which is shown in orange on the map, was mistakenly not sent a notice of the development variance permit by mail. The procedures bylaw requires all property owners and tenants within 50 meters of the subject properties to be sent a notice. However, I did want to let council know that a letter of support was received from this property owner at 18331 Crystal Waters Road. So obviously they were aware of the proposed retaining wall variances. And all other property owners that were sent the notice also sent letters of support. So the map shows with a yellow star the properties that sent a letter of support. So before I continue, I wanted to ask if council has any questions about notification requirements, or should I continue with my presentation?
As far as I'm concerned, you can continue, but it doesn't change the intent of what our signage was, because everybody was notified who may have had concern, as I see it. So carry on.
Thank you. So as previously mentioned, this is related to 2 properties, 18263 and 18281, which are located off Crystal Waters Road. They're adjacent to the rail trail and Kalamalka Lake. This orthophoto again shows 18263, which is the property to the south, and that's the property that's the subject of the development permit and the development variance permit, and then 18281, which is the subject of the development variance permit only. The properties are accessed from a 100-meter shared asphalt driveway off Crystal Waters Road that encroaches into the district's road dedication, as council knows all about now. 63 Crystal Waters Road is accessed from a private easement that crosses over 18281 Crystal Waters Road. And the development variance permit is for overheight retaining walls that will be used to construct the new access to 18263 Crystal Waters Road. And the retaining walls again cross the property line between the two properties. And then this orthophoto is old, so 18263 is now vacant, and all existing structures have been demolished. These are some site context photos. So the photo on the left is taken from the top of the property at 18263, again showing that it's vacant and that it does slope down towards Kalamulka Lake. And then the photo on the right, again, is taken from 18263 Crystal Waters, looking north. It shows the existing access at the top of the property and existing retaining walls. And then the arrow is showing the approximate location of the new access, which is proposed lower to meet the required driveway grades. And then this photo is taken from 18281, and it's looking towards 18263, again showing that existing access. And this is the area with the proposed overheight retaining walls. So this existing access would become a parking space for the property owner at 18281, and then the new access would be below. I won't linger too long on this site plan because I do realize that it's difficult to read, but it does show in red the location of the overheight retaining walls. And then the landscape plan is a little bit easier to read. So it shows that the house is proposed mid-property, closer to Kalamulka Lake. The accessory building is proposed behind the house. No development, so you can see there's a, hopefully you can see there's a green line that shows the 30-meter riparian assessment area. No structures are proposed within that area except for retaining walls and some landscaping, but an environmental assessment was submitted and the QEP doesn't have any concerns. As you can see, there are other retaining walls proposed on the property, which are landscaped. They curve with the natural slope and they are stepped to reduce their height. They will be constructed with Kettle Valley granite, and they again will be landscaped with drought tolerant and indigenous species. I did want to flag for council that it came to my attention today that it was mistaken about the overheight retaining walls. They will not be constructed with Kettle Valley granite. Instead, they'll be constructed with a lock block type material, and that's due to their height and engineering requirements. This is the proposed variances. So they really are two different walls, but I separated them into 4 variances because of the differing heights. So the heights vary from a maximum of 1.98 meters, as shown with retaining wall B, up to 4.27 meters max height for retaining wall C. These site sections hopefully illustrate a bit better the retaining walls. So this site section is located at 18281, and it shows that a portion, so the red is the overheight portion, a little bit would be visible from the edge of the road, but for the most part they'd be blocked by Frank's garage. Site section B and C are from 18263, and again showing the retaining walls and then the other stepped retaining walls. And again, they mostly would be blocked by the existing structure and the proposed structures, so would not likely be that visible from the rail trail. And then in the interest of time, I didn't include all of the elevations, but here are 2 elevations for the house. So the front elevation would be facing Crystal Waters, and the rear elevation would be visible from the rail trail. The accessory building elevation, so the one on the left is the front elevation. So if you're standing at the top of 18263, that's what you would see. And then finally, the house and accessory building do have varying roof lines and an overall design that is articulated and minimizes the visual impact. And then due to the slope of the site, the buildings would not be visible from Crystal Waters Road. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor McKenzie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Tamara, can you go back to the site context slide, the very first one that shows the retaining wall,
Yes, absolutely.
please?
Oops, pardon me.
Okay, so that first one, so that retaining wall on the picture on the right, is that retaining wall getting removed or is that retaining wall staying in place?
It would be removed, is my understanding.
Okay, and then so with all those lines on that drawing from overhead, it was very confusing to see where the driveway was coming in. So I take it from where you have that picture you just came off of, where you have that pointed at, it's coming through that bottom driveway that was right against the fence of the neighbors. So
yes.
I take it that's where it's coming through. So then the retaining wall, that the 3.5 is going to be right across there, holding up the road above there. I'm not sure if that is that road getting removed or what's happening with that other road then. Is that accessing the top of that property? Because you on the drawing you have a lot larger retaining wall above there, and I'm just curious why is that, like or we're obviously gonna have to bring in some fill or we're cutting into that bank?
Through the mayor. So the existing access will be closed and would be essentially turned into a parking space, as you can see here, for the neighboring property owner at 18281.
Okay.
Then the driveway would be dropped down and run below the existing access. So there would be an additional retaining wall there to hold up that slope.
Okay, so now the largest retaining wall, the one that's over 4, that one, why, like there's an existing retaining wall there? Like when you look at the picture, that's where we're looking, is that not correct? And so I'm just curious how we're getting to one that size in that location.
Thank
right?
you.
If you look at that picture.
Through the
Right?
mayor, the applicant, Jennifer Berkheim with Gibson Contracting, as well as the property owner, are available, and they might be able to speak to that, the rationale better than I am.
Okay, because the other thing in there, it says they're all curved retaining walls. Well, that wall there is straight as an arrow. So to me, it seems like we need a little clarification on that wall and what's the purpose of one that big if that's not going to be the road coming in? Because now that starts to push into where our road is.
Could you respond to that, Tamara? Is that the wall?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to respond to my comment in the council report about the curving retaining walls was intended only to speak to the retaining walls that are not over height. Just for a point of clarification.
Okay, so then this wall that's in place there, is that extended? Because that's definitely not 4. So if that's the location of the 4, are they removing that and cutting that into the bank? That's what I'm, it appears like on that drawing.
Wall C.
Right, it says C is 4.27. When you look at that retaining wall would be lucky if it's 2 meters right now. So we're coming up with another, we're doubling the size of that retaining wall. I'm just curious, you're not going to build on top of it, I can't imagine. So how are we ending up with that size?
Take the dirt away from under it.
It could very well be. It would just be nice to get that clarified, because even when you go farther up, with that one at 3.5, how are we getting there from what is shown? Because you're obviously having to cut into that bank, or you're removing and going lower down. Something has to change there in order for this to happen. So it would be nice to have that clarified, because from what I see, it looks like there's going to be some major movement going on there.
There's somebody says they can speak to that. Can we, I didn't catch who it was.
Rob Nespliak.
And
Probably
Jennifer Burkham, the contractor, are both on. If you can turn your cameras on, please, Jennifer and Rob. And Tamara, if you would
I have my camera and mic on.
on your screen.
So to answer your question, Councillor McKenzie, the retaining wall you're looking at in that photo is actually down the slope from where this is proposed. This high wall that you're asking about is being proposed to be built. That high retaining wall is to support the road. The road that it was discussed in 11.1 that was moved up in this meeting, the existing road that is in especially I guess district property, is there to support that road. So by doing that and to create the driveway that meets the municipal bylaws that are part of Lake Country, which is allowing us to do that down through the neighbor's property, which we've created. We have an understanding with the neighbors, and they're on board, and they suggested that we use this area as a trade-off to enable the slope to be more gentle into the property and meet all bylaw requirements. But it does require that high wall then to support the road up above to create that space.
Okay, so you know, the plans that we're looking at is not very clearly showing that, and so can you explain to us exactly how that road is working then? Because if you're going gradual, we were just talking about the road coming through right above that fence, and now this is how is this road tying into there? Because you know, I'm not quite grasping where this is. This almost sounds like two different roads.
It is, and that's there's a. I can't bring up my screen to show you, unfortunately, but there is a plan that shows that more clearly. So there's the existing road that is part of the covenant that was just discussed. That's the high retaining wall is retaining and will be there for. The driveway we're talking about comes off of that road further down. As that road slopes down, if you've been to the property, you'd sort of see how that existing road in your easement drops down quite a bit when it goes to the north. We're coming off of that low point across what is now right behind that fence that you're describing, and coming down a slope into our property to make that all work in there. And it's the only tangible way to make that space work for access. We've looked at about 10 different options and discussed a couple of them with others.
Is he still there, or did you just you just cut out there? Can you repeat that?
Sorry, you know, we looked at a number of options and this is the best option for resolving the slopes and grades in that area to keep the driveways passable and safe for everyone and meeting your bylaw requirements for those driveways.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that correctly, then you're cutting into that slope where all those trees are. And then you're going to make that so that is there actually going to be any trees left in there, or is that going to go right to our road?
That whole area is, according to the landscape plan, we have to create retaining walls all the way up that slope to meet your new bylaw. So those trees, for the most part, are going to disappear because we have to meet your bylaw, we have to now install retaining walls and then landscape all of that. So it will be stepped, that entire hill, all the way up to the existing road, the driveway in. We call that the common driveway, if that's a better sort of descriptor to make sense, the shared driveway. The specific driveway into our property comes off of that common driveway towards the north.
So then you have a sharp corner as you're coming down that hill in order to get in there, or you're pulling to the bottom to get in. And the big consideration here is for fire protection, right? Because you got a fire truck, we need to be able to have it in there.
And that was another reason for putting our driveway at that location, is it gives us the widest possible turning radius. And I believe 4.2 meters is your requirement. And we're able to maintain that in that location. But that's it's simply the best solution that we can find to making it work.
Okay.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Scarrow and then Councillor Koza.
Councillor Reed had your hand up before Councillor.
I didn't have my hand up, James, but Cara did.
Oh, I'll take Councillor Koza then, and then Councillor Reed. Didn't see Councillor Reed, sorry.
Ladies first, if you'd like.
No, she was chasing her dog.
All right, you're muted.
And she's muted. Okay, yeah, the one thing I wanted to say is I didn't like the signage thing. We got to make sure that we get that straight to our developers, that has to be put up properly. So it kind of irked me a little bit, but for the most part, this does seem like it has acceptance upon the community. So I can't say anything negative about it if it seems that all the community in the local area likes it. What I liked really about this report too is that, I don't know, sometimes we get these reports and you zoom in and everything goes fuzzy, or maybe it's too late in the night. But what I really liked about this report was that I could zoom in as close as I wanted and I could see everything just so clearly. And this was just a super good report. The one page I think that Todd was wondering about was the best one that shows this road and shows it in great detail is page 61 of the report. And if I'm not mistaken, kind of the dotted, dashed, looks like an SOS symbol thing, ham radio operator here, but I think that's the center of the roadway. And as the gentleman alluded to, yeah, it's 4.2 meters right around the corner of it. It almost looks like even at that one spot, there's a little hook and everything like that. I like everything about this except for the size of the retaining walls. And just, I would like to see us have more of a living retaining wall if we could, unless the engineers say no on that. But I would not be for a cinder block wall. But if there was some sort of living wall, you would have my vote 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for everyone's comments. I suppose why I'm getting confused, and I'm not like Jeremy. I found the report very difficult to understand, as there was no elevation drawings of the retaining walls, and it would have been nice to have those. But I'm getting, I suppose my point of confusion is this seems a lot of retaining walls to be producing just for a driving space or parking space. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but the walls to the south of the retaining walls are all stepped, terraced, landscaped, curved, and done in Kettle Valley granite, and those stop at the southernmost sort of point of this new parking slot. So my question would be why it just seems an excessive amount of concrete and 4 meters high to be introduced just to provide a parking space as it's been described as, and why it's a lot of variance for just one thing. It's not providing, to me, it doesn't seem to be providing any additional function other than a parking space for the property at 18281. So I suppose I have a problem with that, but maybe Rob can enlighten me as to if there's another reason for the necessity for this 4 meter high wall.
Certainly, to try and put some context to this. So the neighbor to the north of us is giving up their parking spaces that they currently have, their space that is their land. They're giving up to us to facilitate us being able to put this driveway in at a reasonable slope. Being a good neighbor, this becomes a community thing where we are trying to give them back their space that they're losing as part of this development, because that only seems fair to us to accommodate the fact that they're giving up space to allow us to have this driveway in this location. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the slopes in that area, this is what we end up with. I mean, we've looked at a variety of options. The challenge becomes if we try to lower the height of the wall remains the same ultimately. The challenge we could have is perhaps have the grade a little bit higher, but it becomes untenable for space to use. It becomes you're basically having to climb up a hill to get into it. that doesn't make a whole lot of sense and doesn't become functional for that neighbor. So this is about, for us, it's about creating community with our neighbors. They've all been part of this conversation to come up with this plan. Like I said, we believe this is the best solution that accommodates those needs. And also, as much as this is a high wall, you can't see it unless you're actually in it. It's not visible from any location above it or below it from the lake. You can't see it. It's behind existing structures. And I mean, not that I know it certainly doesn't, will not resonate well with council perhaps, but there are a number of much higher walls in immediate vicinity to this location. And I understand that. I'm just flagging it as it's not uncommon in that area to have high walls. It's the only area, and the entire rest of the property, we have done everything we can to and have eliminated all high walls. This is the only challenging location because of the engineering that will be required to support the road above the common driveway and to create a proper space for the driveway below. This is what we end up with.
Thank you. I have Councillor Gamble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at this point, I will not be supporting this variance. I am very opposed to seeing all those trees removed. I think that is a very untenable solution in my point of view. And we've heard that spoken about. I'm also very concerned about such high retaining walls. I understand that may be difficult, but I can't support this. We have given a lot of variances in the last number of years, and I think that we are having second thoughts about those variances, and I fail to see the reason for this one.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So looking at this and this retaining wall, I can appreciate that, you know, the rest of the property and how they've treated that and the stepped walls and everything. I think that's great. And the overall development of the property. But it seems to me that and I can appreciate there's an attempt to be a good neighbor here, but to allow a 16.5-foot retaining wall for a parking area, I just can't, it just doesn't wash with me. You know, and you say that, you know, I walked around the whole area and there's a lot of retaining walls around there that are lock block. All I can say to that is, you know, thank God that we're not allowing that anymore, because that's atrocious. And some of those walls that I've seen there they're not level, they're not, you know, they're a disaster waiting to happen. And environmentally, this is a disaster for our community. To put in a 16-foot retaining wall for a parking area, you know, for extra cars, because, you know, looking at the property, your neighbor does have parking. He has a garage, he has parking there. And I appreciate he's giving up some of his access, but I can't see a 16-foot retaining wall unless, you know, there was some move towards a gabion block wall that was planted. And, you know, that's perfectly structural. We have them on highways. They're well over 15 feet high. They're all around the community. You just don't see them because they're planted and they don't become the heat sinks and the problems that the other walls do. So that's the only way that I could support this size of wall.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Scarrow.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Baker. I went, like I said, there today and everything like that, and learned some of the history of the area and what a beautiful area it is. And my heart goes out to this gentleman who's trying to, you know, use his property, a very valuable property, I might add. And Rob pointed out the point that really no person except for the direct neighbors really gets an opportunity to have to suffer the visual effects of these walls. It's just those 6 or 7 properties that are going to have to suffer the visual effects of these walls. So although I agree very much with Councillor Gamble and Ireland about the heights of the walls, I sort of see Rob's point about this being the best and perhaps only option to utilize this property. So I'm not so necessarily opposed in this particular case. But like Councillor Mackenzie pointed out, it's really difficult to follow this plan. And I've been surprised before by what I see. And to go back to Councillor Ireland and these natural walls, you said, Rob, that you have to step this wall back as per district guidelines because, and that as a result, those trees get lost, eh? So could you not step it back with a living wall? That would be a question for Rob.
Potentially, yes. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, potentially. This is all part of getting into detailed engineering. We're trying to demonstrate the concept of what this is, and what we think is the initial concept would be the Lego block. We're certainly amenable to looking at other alternative materials, as long as the engineering of it will support what needs to be done in this location. So, and I understand from Councillor Ireland, certainly the Gabion block wall, we'll gladly look at that. We haven't fixed that design because that's part of detailed engineering. We need to understand that the concept of this is acceptable.
The other question I have for you, Rob, goes back to that existing stone wall, about 3 meters high, 2 meters high, that runs along the second driveway there. That existing stone retaining wall, that those services are behind for the Club Cal down below. Does your plans affect that wall at all?
No.
So that wall is going to stay the same, not going to get changed, not going to be touched. We're not going to have issues. Okay, I appreciate your input.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rob, so I have a question about the accessory building on the top, because the accessory building looks like what's forcing you to go up and around. I'm not really comfortable with losing the trees on that as well for, exactly like my fellow councillors are saying, a big heat sink. A variance to me is solving an issue, and I can agree with something if it's solving an issue. I have trouble agreeing with something if it's just making a parking lot, and we're ending up with something that's not very environmentally friendly. So I'm just curious with that accessory building, what exactly is in there? Can you sacrifice that to make this work and smaller walls?
The accessory building actually has nothing to do with the road or the walls. The road is, we designed the road first and foremost to get the slopes required to meet your bylaws. It's the only way that we can, this is the only location that allows us to do that.
Is the accessory building not between the two roads?
No, it's below.
No.
Below.
See this?
Below.
Yeah.
So okay, it has nothing to do with the road itself.
So I do have a problem with the bigger wall for sure, and I agree with my fellow councillor as far as the green wall and stuff that's living. One thing I would say that I'm was happy to see on your report is, and it's one of the first ones I've seen, is you're incorporating recycling rainwater, which is something there that that box doesn't get ticked very often. But that's a green solution, whereas this wall is not a green solution. This wall is actually against what we're trying to promote here in the community. So, if we can come up with a different solution for that wall, that might be good. But I'm definitely not a fan of looking at all that cement. Whether you can see that or not, it's something we're allowing to happen in here, and I would kind of like to see a different solution. So, if it's a better option at this time, if it looks like we're not going to do this, well, maybe we need to refer it back and look at another option. So I'm just curious, do you have an option B? Because that's sort of what I'm hearing here is we're not really super in favor of this one.
Well, at this time, I mean, this is all sort of new information. Sort of, we needed to understand where council stood on this because we've had this submitted for quite some time, and we're just getting to this point. So, We're prepared to look at options and come back if that's what's necessary. And we just need some time to do that. But I mean, it's more about sort of getting the overall concept of this development understood and hopefully approved by council, and we'll work on this particular piece that is the variance. And I think that's why it's been separated out as a separate piece of the development permit application. It's a separate development permit, so that if there's these concerns, we can address them separately and come back with some answers to that.
I'll hear from the planner again tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make this clear because this did come up in a previous application. The development permit and development variance permit are while they are separate items, they're very much tied together because the fact that the site plan relies on these retaining walls. So in my report, I identified option D, that the development permit and the development variance permit both be referred back to staff. So if council does have any questions about how that works, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. And I think that option C does refer it back to staff with and for information with regard to types of retaining wall that would be more compatible. But the our landscaping plan would be such that there are green plants that cascade as well as go up, and we don't want to do a lot of plants that are not drought tolerant, especially on that hillside. But I don't know, maybe the planner can speak to it being more information coming back. Go ahead.
Right. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if council does want to refer the application back to staff so that the applicant looks at the retaining walls, my suggestion would be to choose option D. Correct. And that's because the retaining walls affect the site plan and potentially the landscape plan, which is part of the development permit.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be supportive of going to option D to try to reduce the height of proposed retaining walls, but also to look at the material structure, or to have a plan to screen them. I mean, there's other options there to reduce the impact. And you know, they've, you know, looking at the landscape plan, they did a tremendous job of keeping the other retaining walls on the property to a minimum and screening and, you know, having lots of planting and that sort of thing. So the focus will not be the walls, and the walls won't be that environmental disaster that they so often are. So yeah, I would be supportive of going to option D to work on those retaining walls. Okay. And to look at them from a material standpoint, a height standpoint, and maybe, you know, with the possibility of screening, you know, as another option.
Okay, thank you. I have to go to the public to see if there are any people phoning in, but I have Councillor Gamble and Councillor McKenzie. You want to talk now, or do you want to see if there's any public comment?
See if there's any public first.
Okay.
Yes, same.
Okay. Anybody calling in?
There's no calls at this time.
No calls. All right, I'll take a motion. One of the
well, I would like to.
Campbell.
Yes, I would like to just add that I would consider supporting the retaining walls if there is an effort, an attempt to retain as many of the trees as possible. To say that they all have to be removed, to me that is a very, very dangerous approach to, you know, certainly lead to more erosion, and as far as, you know, any stability on that steep hillside, you're going to lose it. So I just, you know, I feel very strongly about that, and I think that you know, I'm not the engineer to design it, but I'm quite sure that there are ways to retain some of those trees. Putting in, low vegetation will never replace removing those trees.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie?
So I'll second Councillor Ireland's motion to move option D.
Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Ireland? Councillor Ireland?
I don't know that we've, Councillor Gamble brings up a good point. If there's any, if we could put this into option D somehow in some ability to save some of those trees on that upper side. I
That's,
don't know quite how we do that. That's
an
not really
item,
tied to this retaining wall because they're actually above the other retaining walls.
that's an item identified by council, and planning can take that into consideration.
I think it's important, and Councillor Gamble raises a good point.
All right,
I mean, these are.
then
I
moved
think
and
Kara
seconded.
had her hand up as well.
Oh, she's way up there, tiny.
So, Councillor Ireland, are you adding that to your motion then?
Well, if staff could word that properly, I'm not quite sure how that is.
Staff can take it in as as part of item C, work with
D.
them on
D.
the things raised, but yeah.
D.
D.
I'll hear
Don't do
Tamara and
this
then I'll
again.
hear from Kara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure I understood the motion clearly. So it's option D, but also to look at potentially reducing the height of the retaining walls, consider the materials, consider screening options, and explore the possibility of retaining trees.
Retaining trees, thank you.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Councillor Reid?
correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Councillor Ireland's motion about the reducing the height and looking at the materials, because I do still think this is an awfully high wall just for a parking space, and
Yeah.
I'm still struggling with that, and with the need to be a good neighbour and giving up and creating space, it's still just the parking space. And so if there is an alternative way of providing comfort to the neighbour or remediation to the neighbour, or in some sort of way other than building a 4-metre high retaining wall, whatever it's made of, I would appreciate the applicant having a look at that side of things as well.
All right, thank you.
I'm happy to have those considerations in that motion too.
Call the question, sir.
Yes, I'm trying to read a message here, but I can't see it, so I thought somebody was adding something. Planner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just noticed that Raina made the following comment. She said, I would recommend that the details do not need to be included in the resolution. Planning and staff have identified the items required to be addressed.
Okay, thank
Very
you.
good.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you all, and thanks for the report. I thought it was a good report too, Planner. 10, notice on title on Otley Road. Who's doing that?
That would be me.
Oh, hey, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Zara Rockwell, the Chief Building Inspector, and I will just pull up my presentation just 1 second here.
Thank you.
Is it up there?
Nope.
Nope.
Not yet.
There you go, Zara. Got it.
Okay.
Now you are. Right.
Okay, so the first one is a property at 4435 Otley Road. It has an outstanding building permit for a single family dwelling. And the accessory building, since I did the report, has actually got a final approval. So that one's not a problem anymore. So the purpose is to place a notice on the title for the subject property due to the owner not completing the building permit. Here's the subject property on Otley Road. There's a single family dwelling up above, and then the accessory building is down below. But like as I said, the accessory building did receive final approval. So this was back in 2005, a building permit application was made for a single family dwelling on the subject property. There's a stop work order was subsequently posted as work commenced prior to the building permit issuance. Multiple letters have been sent to the property owners requesting that the outstanding paperwork be submitted in order to grant occupancy permit and to close the building permit. We're still waiting to receive the Schedule CB from both the fire suppression engineer and the structural engineer. And then we did send them a letter to let them know about this notice on title recommendation. And there was also another letter sent to let them know that tonight was the council meeting. So there's some legislation and policies. Section 57 is in the community charter. It allows us to, with council's approval, to place a notice on the title. If this was to go for a development permit, they would have bunch of things here: wildland fire, hillside greenhouse gas, and the property is zoned R2. And this property does not have an occupancy approval, but the people are living there and they have been for several years. So the discussion, the single family dwelling has not received final approval, and the property owner has not brought the property into compliance with the district bylaws and the BC building code. The lack of fire suppression engineer schedule CB and structural engineer CB is a concern to staff. So the recommendations is that the notice on title be placed on the property. However, in the report, there was some other options.
All right. Any question from council? Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. So I just have a question, and it kind of pertains to all of these. If the schedule CB is not done at the time of the concrete pour, is there any way that you can produce a schedule CB?
It's not necessarily at the concrete pour, it's sometime before the occupancy is given. That's the correct procedure, is that, so they could do the concrete pour, let's say in May, and then they're asking for occupancy in December.
Right.
So for December occupancy approval, they have to supply this paperwork.
So but the CB report does not have to, can be done once the concrete's poured and everything's covered up and nothing's visible?
Well, the engineer himself will have to do field reports as he's going along in the process. The CB is letters of assurance in the BC building code. So prior to the building permit going out, we collect a Schedule B that says, I've been retained, I will design and do field inspections for this component. And then before we give occupancy, we are to collect the CBs, which says that the engineer says that I did the design, they built it to my design, and I did the field inspections for that.
And it's only the engineer who did that at the time that can provide that comfort.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right, and was there any, Councillor Gamble?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask Zara Rockwell if what she felt was the issue. Is it mainly a safety issue that you're concerned about here?
Yes, it's a safety.
And I ask that, you know, I see that there have been letters back and forth over the years and no real definitive action has happened from the person or the owners.
Yes, it's a safety issue because the BC building code gives us prescriptive things for certain items. I mean, if they were building an 8-foot foundation wall, I know exactly what they're supposed to do by the BC building code. But in this case, they built a taller than that, so wall. So then the structural engineer needs to design that, because I do not know how that is done. So I'm looking for a reassurance, or the district's looking for reassurance from the engineer to say that they have built this item that is outside of the BC building code. And it's the same thing with the fire suppression system, is the engineer, they're very detailed. They have 7 years of education on one component.
Yes.
Whereas the building inspectors here, we're like, know a lot about lots of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have
Okay.
I have the owner of the Otley Road property on the phone. I don't know if he's been in touch with council previously, but this is.
Can you see me, James?
No, he can't. Zara, can you stop sharing your screen, please, so council can be seen? Thank you. And yes, I do have the property owner on the line if council would like to hear from him. This is a notice on titles, so the owner is sent a letter with the opportunity to be heard by council.
So we'll hear from the owner, if that's who's on the Otley Road property, because there are others.
There we are.
Mr. Drager, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, you are live in council chambers. Please make sure and turn all devices off in the background so that we don't hear any feedback. And you can go ahead and speak.
Will I let them hear?
No, you're live. You can go ahead. You can start speaking. They can hear you.
Hello.
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 Yeah, this is James and Elizabeth Drager. Yeah, I can barely hear you.
Can council hear? Mr. Drager, if you'd please turn the sound off in the background. You'll have to listen just through the phone.
Oh, I see. I have it on speaker.
No, it didn't work.
No.
Okay.
Pick up the phone and turn the live feed off in the background and just listen through the audio through the phone.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you now. I've turned on the computer.
Okay, perfect. So council can hear you. So if you'd like to have any comments or address council with any statements, you can go ahead.
Okay, just to give you a little bit of a rundown from our perspective, is Dennis Free was our engineer and he was our neighbor, and he did our design. And are you still talking?
We can hear you. Council with any statements, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Drager, you'll have to listen to the voice through the phone, not through the live feed.
Okay. I can't hear any of the camera. Okay. Well, just to give you from our perspective, is Dennis Free was our engineer and he was our good friend and neighbor down the street. And he did all the design and had everything in line and all the building codes and everything. We have all the papers, so does the district, of all his designs and stamps. And we have all his inspection reports, which say okay to pour concrete. And he came in and did both inspections. There was a stop work order, and that was because Randy was your inspector then, Randy Reed. And I think he got his nose out of joint with Dennis, because Dennis said we didn't need to call him for inspection because it's only a nice thing to do if you call the inspector, supposedly. So he signed it off, and then that was taken off later, and we carried on with our build, and all the papers were signed and handed in, except for the very final stamp. After we got occupancy from Randy, we have the paper that says we have occupancy. So we moved in, and with kids, and my dad died of cancer and things carried on. We never heard back. Then all of a sudden, Zara sent us the paperwork saying we were missing the final stamp from Dennis. So my wife, we visited numerous times your office, and we tracked down the paperwork, and we went and got Dennis. We had to get Dennis back into the office. He signed the paper and reassured us it was exactly what we needed. He signed and said it's done, complete, stamped it, signed it with his engineer stamp. We dropped it off at the office, at the desk, and again, we never heard anything for two months or so. So assuming that's good news. Then about a month after that, we get another message from Zara saying it's the wrong paper. She wants a different one. So Elizabeth tracked down Dennis again. His son had to help him into his office. He's not doing very well. He signed another paper again saying, absolutely, this is done deal. Elizabeth your office right away, but left it at the lower office with the ladies because I don't know, for some reason. And then again, we never heard for a month. And then all of a sudden Zara said we didn't leave the paper. So somehow the paper got misplaced at your office, but Dennis did sign the final one. And we do have the ones that he had signed, the CB here with dates on them, and you received them on the June 29th, 2017. The B2. The B2 and the B1, but it's all his field reports are saying everything was proper and inspected, good concrete, ready to pour. So everything was done properly, and we have all his plans, and we got the plans from you too. You have them in our file, all the details of his design, all his stamped papers. And as far as the fire sprinkler system, again, the time flies by, and we didn't realize we didn't have that paper from them. And Zara even contacted Chapman in Vernon, and they'd already had sold the company twice over in the 10-year period, and they could be no help. So Zara's recommendation was to get an engineer to sign off a paper. Besides Dennis' work, there's no engineer that will take on anybody else's project. We tried 5 engineers, and that took a period of time, and nobody will sign off anybody's stuff unless they built it. And I even contacted the Engineering Association of British Columbia and talked to the head main person. And he said because Dennis is he was semi-retired then, you won't get anybody that'll sign it off because he doesn't work for a firm. Where normally when someone passes away, because when my wife went back to get him to sign the 3rd paper, he had passed away already. His son said he was gone. So there was no option there. And the association said you won't get a guy to sign it because no engineer will sign someone else's stuff. So we have all the details of all the designs. I built it. I built many homes. I did all the. I would have never poured concrete without Dennis's signature and sign off. Like I say, we have his field report.
And he lived down the street, and he came up constantly because he enjoyed watching the program.
Yeah, I think it was his semi-retirement project. He was enjoying coming over, so we saw him a lot.
Okay, well, it sounds to me like we're having a problem tracking down those papers that were signed, and certainly our building department doesn't have them, whether it was our fault or your engineer's fault. And I know Dennis well. I enjoyed his company. I thought he was a good engineer, but it seems to me that we are lacking the documents that would give you safe occupancy, and unless we have something that have that, we notice on title just indicates that there, according to our records, there is something deficient, and if you want to sell the property or somebody else looks at it or goes to buy it, then there's a notice on title that there are deficiencies, and that is, as far as our enforcement goes, is to try to get people to comply. And if we don't have the papers, we can't do the occupancy in that way. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just ask, I'm not sure how this works, but there was a letter dated September the 10th, 2019 from the district And it says, in order to close the file, we require the following: letter of certification, final approval of the access permit, and Schedule CB from the structural engineer, and a final inspection. I don't know who did the ticking, but it looks like 3 of those 4 things have been ticked off with a red mark, which maybe I'm reading it wrong, but it sounds like it's indicating they've been received and we're waiting on the final inspection. Is that correct?
Yep.
Zara,
It's included in the report on this item.
you have all one item?
They don't go in chronological order on the report, so it's kind of difficult to say which page it is. It doesn't have a page number according to this, but it's sort of, yeah, I can't tell you where it is because the report doesn't have page numbers.
It's the third one. It's the third from the bottom.
Thanks, Claire.
Page 19. And you're quite right. It's got check marks on each of those things other than the final inspection.
And the top left always shows you what page you're on too, Kara, so you know. Councillor Reed.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Reed.
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure what the letter says, but I have checked the file when I did the report, and we do not have the Schedule CB from the structural engineer or the fire suppression engineer. Somebody may have checked it off when we received this other document that he's referring to that wasn't the correct one.
Well, if I can speak, if I received this letter, it tells me that all I need is a final inspection, and call this number to get that inspection.
That's not the letter that would have been sent out. That was just an internal, like our copy. So, I mean, it could have been the clerk could have come in and said, oh, we received this and checked it off. But that's not the letter that was sent out. The letter was sent out did not have the red checks on it.
Okay.
Did I speak?
But it does seem to support the comments that the McGregors have made around that it might have been dropped off with the district.
Because we received probably the wrong year's worth because there was a code change. So we need the one from the 1998 code that would have been in effect when the building permit was pulled. So things have changed over the time.
Are there discrepancies that it's a difficult one?
For one, I'm not comfortable with this at all.
Mr. Mayor, I believe the owner would like to speak again. Sorry.
Oh, the force be with you. Who's
He
mic
needs
is that?
My apologies. The owner is on the line, would like to speak again if council would like to hear from him.
Okay,
Yes, please.
yes.
Go ahead.
You
Nick.
Yeah. I have the paper from Czar when she came up and did the final inspection on, I think it was 2016 or 17 she came up. So she has done the final inspection on site. Only one was the engineered structural and the fire sprinkler. So I have both those papers. And I did get a week ago emailed everything, all of Dennis' field notes, all his stamps, everything from him. So you have all that on file. Plus I have it all on my file at home here.
Where was that sent to? Because I didn't receive that.
Jamie, if you have that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. I certainly don't have the documents pertaining to this file, but what I can recommend in this case is, effectively, maybe I should have provided some introductory comments, but with respect to the notice on title process, this is a case of a number of years of cleaning up some, somewhere in the range of 80 community-wide notice on title files, and this is our first one kicking off Building Safety Month in the province. Now, that being said, in this case, There is a sense of duty and obligation as a building official in the province of British Columbia to bring these files forward when there's concern, and those are some of my general comments about this overall process. Whereas tonight we have 3 of these files coming forward. In this regard, it does seem to be that there's some confusion, and we can certainly work to clarify these matters, get the information, make sure that whatever historical inconsistencies there are, and we can certainly report back to council. They definitely don't feel there's no obligation. Council has the full discretion and authority to place notices on title, similar to the remedial action requirement. So there's no obligation to do that tonight.
Okay, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we don't have to defer it back. We just, how do we do this then, Jamie? We just not approve it? How is best to handle this? Because I do agree it needs to, this one that shouldn't be getting approved or not right now. It should probably be looked at again. There's way too many questions on this one for me to agree to this one.
You could move option C.
C.
So move.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Read option C first, please.
Was that, and Councillor McKenzie?
Can you read it? Can
It's
somebody read it just because we're
notice
got this
on not be placed on title, and community. The building division continue to work with property owner to bring the property into compliance, and it just may be a matter of tracking down those papers. And Councillor Kozub?
I just want to make an add too that I liked what Councillor Reid said too, and it was very hard to follow because it was kind of discombobulated. I don't know how they ended up in such disorder, but when I'm reading the report, I want to see it in chronological. When I'm trying to go, okay, this happened, that happened, I'm skipping back and forth, I'm writing notes. It's adding to my time. So if this does, when this does come back, I want to see it all in order.
Okay.
Please.
Councillor Arna, are you moving or?
Well, sure, I'll move option C, but I also wanted to add some comments to Councillor Kozub's comments because I do agree with him. But I'd like to see the correspondence back. So, is this person responding to us or not? Yeah. Is this 15 letters that gone unanswered? That changes everything. Or if there's responses and there's problems, I'd like to see the chronological order of the file with everything included.
Okay,
not the technical details. I'm not interested in the technical details, but the communication back and forth is what I'm interested in.
Okay.
I think where the confusion is that the 2 attachments, one is for the single family dwelling. Attachment A is only pertaining to the single family dwelling, whereas the attachment B is pertaining to the accessory building, and the accessory building in this meantime has been closed. I did receive the information from the property owners to close the accessory building permit. And it is all in chronological order. The report is in chronological order for 2 separate permits. The attachments are in chronological order for 2 separate permits.
Very good, thank you.
I'll second option C.
Okay, Councillor McKenzie, and those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Zara. On to the next one, and we'll see if there's clarity in this one.
For some reason, my PowerPoint for this second one is not allowing me to access it.
Okay.
Is this the Seton Road one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to it.
Yeah, okay.
Any one of us who drove by that deck today can see that it's half fallen down already. It's the most dangerous thing I ever saw. If we ever need to put a notice on title on something, this is the place.
I would concur with that. If that was the same building that was on part of this. Can you speak to it some, Zara?
Yeah, this property too had a stop work order. This goes back quite a ways now. had a stop work order, and then they finally came in to get a permit, but we've never been able to get them to close the permit. Then they did get a second permit for the roof over, and one of our inspectors tried to go out there to do a final, and he's just like, no, this is just not built to code at all, and recommending that we place a notice on title. I've never heard from the property owners on this one. They've never come back to me to try to
move option A, sir.
Anything.
Okay, we have
move option A.
Move option D. Councillor Gamble second. Any further discussion?
Hold on a sec. You said option A. Option A.
Option A is the one I'm moving, sir.
Notice on title be placed.
That's right.
And the building permit file be closed. Option D was, I thought it would get at remedial action, but no. Just close it?
Well, yeah, they haven't. May I speak to that, sir?
Yeah.
If they haven't responded in the 15 years we've been trying to contact them, and they built a deck that like that, I don't know if they have kids, but they put their kids at risk by using a deck like that. It just seems to me that the remediation is just, the only thing they could do is tear it down.
Okay.
Raina wants to talk to it.
Oh, and so too does Jamie. I'll take the staff first. Raina, are you there?
Sure, although Jamie might want to.
Okay, Jamie.
If council wishes for remedial action, that is certainly an option where we can go in and clean up the property, declare it a nuisance. Would have to come back and get a separate resolution from council declaring it a nuisance. We can go in, clean it up, and put the cost back on the property taxes of that property, if that was council's wish for option D.
Okay. Jamie?
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. I've had the privilege, or the experience of going through a remedial action in the past, and it's not certainly not a fantastic experience, and never one that we want to necessarily go to right off the bat. So it is provided as an option for in council's discretion. However, that being said, in terms of the context, I would recommend that if council did want to go that path on any file, that what we do is we place the notice on title tonight, and then subsequently we could investigate remedial action requirements and report back on that separately, since it is potentially a large and staff capacity driven experience.
Right.
I completely agree, sir.
Yes.
So, Councillor Scarrow, you were saying A though.
On move option A, looking
I'll
for a
second
second.
it.
Councillor McKenzie second. Any further discussion? Councillor Ireland? Councillor Ireland?
Yeah, I just want to talk about that deck. So if we close the file, that deck exists.
Yeah.
Somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
We're not responsible. But in remedial action, can we stop them using that deck? I mean, some people aren't, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Scarrow, but what if some kid's over there playing gets hurt on that deck? Because we said, okay, well, we're just going to place a notice on title and wash our hands of it.
I don't think that's what we said.
Well, that's what we're saying. Absolutely. That's what option A says.
Notice on title and close the file.
And close the file. That's what that says.
And Jamie just told us that we would do that as a first step. And then that this.
No, if we went to option D, where we put the notice on title of it, then did remedial action.
Well, I disagree. I think that these people have created their own problem, and we should leave these people to solve their own problem. That's how I feel.
The problem is not.
It's not so much about them, it's somebody else.
Forgotten.
So I'm certainly not going to support that and have somebody getting hurt on my conscience, that's for sure.
Jamie?
Your Worship, not to encourage motions on the fly in this regard, but if council did wish to put a notice on title on the property, a subsequent resolution could be that, and that staff report back to council on the process and capacity implications of a remedial action requirement for this property. And so subsequently, council doesn't have to make the decision about placing or conducting a remedial action tonight, but directing staff tonight to further bring forward some information as to how that could be done, the logistics of it, and so on. That could be an option for
amendment,
council.
Blair. I'll accept it.
I would be fine with that. I don't need to go and remediate the whole property, but I do not want someone to get hurt.
Then I will accept that amendment.
So
Okay.
that's how I would see remedial action on this particular property.
Councillor Gamble?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm okay with this change, but I do think that what we heard from Director McEwen is that that's a first step to put the notice on title. And if in fact this becomes more derelict, more rundown, and it becomes more dangerous, then we could pursue remedial action. But it is important for us as council, I think, to be aware of the cost implications of embarking on remedial action. That could take us into legal action, different things. So that has a cost to it.
All right. It was just my concern that A was that it would close the file, and as Councillor Ireland rightfully said, that seems to be abrogating our responsibility to try to make things safe. And if we're leaving derelict buildings without any further action.
I think Raina has a comment.
Oh, Raina?
She's got a suggestion.
I would just recommend, so we have a motion on the floor for option A right now. So if council would like to amend that motion to add wording that staff be directed to bring forward information on a potential remedial action on the property, I would request a mover and seconder for that amendment.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment if I could.
Kenzie and Councillor Scarrow. Yeah, you were movers and seconders. It can be a friendly amendment.
That's what I was suggesting, sir, a friendly amendment.
But it's your motion, so it would have to be.
It's not an amendment, it changes the intent of the motion.
And
I mean, it's not
putting a notice on title, but it's.
If I had a suggestion, mayor and council could certainly vote on the one that's on the table. They could add a secondary resolution that is separate that says, we're going to send you away, staff, to go and investigate remedial action. So we can still close the building file, I believe, and still instigate remedial action without going back and amending the original resolution.
I'll take the motion on option A then, and then we'll come back with a subsequent resolution. Those in favor of option A?
I just want to.
Go ahead.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
I want to be sure that closing the file does not close the file.
Yeah.
I want to be assured of that because I'm not going to vote for it.
We'll have another resolution
that, and that's not going to.
Yeah. We'll have another resolution. So
Yeah.
passing this one. Those in favor?
So
option A.
Hold on a sec.
So I would probably let Raina speak to that, but remedial action is separate from the building inspection. So closing the building permit does not impact the remedial action piece. Remedial action can be taken at any time, regardless of whether there's an open building permit or not. So I would say that closing the building permit would absolutely be okay, and that staff could continue to look at remedial action without an open building permit.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you, Tanya.
Okay. And option A passed, so now we need a resolution.
You might want to do that option A one more time, because I only see.
Those in favor of option A? Okay. That's carried. Those opposed? None opposed. Carried. And a resolution to pursue or investigate. Councillor Ireland, you state your motion?
Yeah, to investigate remedial action in regards to the safety of the deck on that property.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Mackenzie? Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Now, next item on Cars Landing Road, and I spoke with this property owner, and actually he made a good case for not having the drawings that I'll let building chief inspector state her case, and but with that I would like to see this one sent back as well. But Zara?
I apologize again. I don't know what's happening with my presentations, but this one is still saying access denied. I need to see the administrator, whatever that means. This was a building permit back from 2004. They were granted an occupancy approval with a subject to providing the structural engineer schedule CB, which we have not received. Same sort of situation as the first. Is there a risk? I don't know. Option B might be the one to go for on this one.
Yeah, it was certainly it was difficulty, and then similar to the first one we dealt with, the engineering wasn't correct, or the files weren't correct. Councillor Reid, did you speak with the owner on the Cars Landing notice on title?
Yeah, yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke at length with Hugh and Elaine Calder, and they were able to give me some additional background. Again, I think it was one of our other councillors spoke to hearing the other, you're seeing the other side of the report in the reports, and staff in DCAT did contact them and advised them. I saw a copy of the final inspection report. I think in our copy of the report, it's referred to as a temporary occupancy, but the piece of paper they showed me did say final inspection on it. Quite shortly after that request was made, they provided, in fact, at the time of the inspection, they provided 2 out of the 4 missing items, and but quite shortly after that, in the terms of timescales we're talking about, I think in the January after the July, they advised staff that the contractor had gone out of business, and the contractor hired the engineer, and so there was a dispute that they were kind of not party to in terms of accessing this report, and they have been trying to get the report. And I, you know, obviously looking at, they have the same similar engineering drawings and the B1 and the B2, and it's up to this final report. So I don't know whether they're on the line at the moment, but when I was speaking to them on Sunday, they were still attempting to get the information from Mr. Trigg, who was the engineer. So I think the intent has been positive on all sides to try and get a resolution to this, and the document was produced. It was in existence, and that was confirmed by Mr. Trigg at the time. It was the provision of that was subject to a dispute outside of the property owner's remit, in a sense.
I think this one could be option C with Jamie. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. You know, this is a case of truly empathizing with a property owner who is in a difficult situation, but also balancing with that the duties and responsibilities of our building official colleagues, and in bringing forward these issues where we have not been able to fully close the loop on these types of property issues. So bringing it forward to council, it is fully at council's discretion, as I mentioned on a previous file. If council so wishes, if they do wish to see any details or go through it, I am able to access the PowerPoint. I know exactly the issue that our chief building official is facing on that. I've had it happen to me before, and it always happens when you have to present it. So I do have it here if you do need to, you know, see aerial properties or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
The owner is on the line, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I do just want to clarify in that regard. You know, this is a very difficult situation in terms of closing that loop and getting that that engineer to provide that final sign off in this case, right? And you know, our ultimate goal as the staff team is to always work towards compliance, not enforcement.
Right. And that's what the option C is. And if I did have a call from the owner and said that talked with, or I had an email from Councillor Reid, who had also talked to him, and I thought that we could pursue option C, but if he wants to address council and is available, I'm not sure. Reina, do we have?
I will. Now, I'm sorry, I apologize. William didn't give me the owner's name.
Mr. Calder, Hugh and Elaine. Yeah.
Okay. I will,
yeah. He's there.
Mr. Calder?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, you are live in council chambers, so just make sure all the sound is turned off in the background and you can go ahead and speak. Council can hear you.
Silence was the stern.
Oh, I'm silent. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought there'd be a beep or something like that. So, no, the only reason why I'm on the line, I thought if there was any questions that the councillors or the mayor had for me, I'd be glad to answer. But by the sounds of it, we're going with option C, if I'm correct in that, and I'm all right with that. So,
okay. Any questions for Mr. Calder? Hearing none, I'll take a motion for option C.
Yeah.
Councillor Reid and Councillor Gamble. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Calder, for
thank you.
Being up so late at night, listening to your local government at work.
Thanks, Zara.
Good night.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Bye-bye, Zara.
Yeah. And we'll now hear from our Manager of Development and the Development Approval Procedures Bylaw.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you see my presentation?
We can indeed. Yes. Good evening.
You got it rocked.
All right. I can't see it, but you can. That's the important part. So in order to keep myself on script, likely going to read quite a bit from my notes. Really hopeful that we can make some progress this evening. Excited to get some new information out to the community. So as you know, Council and the community have asked that growth and development be sensitive to the environment, respectful of Lake Country's character, that the review of each proposal be rigorous, with due attention to detail and standards equitably applied. The package of information presented to you this evening responds to the questions raised by Council at the January 19th Council meeting, when Council endorsed in principle the policy and regulation framework fact sheet, adopted the professional reports and technical studies terms of reference, Council Policy 186 to 2021, and gave first reading to the Development Approval Procedures Bylaw 1133. This is the bylaw proposed to replace Development Application Procedures Bylaw 99-240. Following initial consideration, the bylaw was circulated for comment from external agencies and amended to respond to the comments and correct identified inconsistencies. Additional readings of the amended bylaw are proposed to move the process to the next step, being adoption and implementation of improved communication materials that support Council strategic priorities and improve customer service outcomes. The intention, of course, is to create positive change in the definition, administration, and conduct of development application processes. These changes are expected to improve relationships with key stakeholders, establish a comprehensive awareness of the standards for development proposal submission, clearly defined roles and responsibilities for various aspects of the process, and to lay the foundation for ongoing development process improvements. You will recall I shared this this graphic with you previously. Land use planning and management activities include consideration of development applications in a manner that responds to the community's vision through the regional growth strategy and the official community plan. master plans, area structure plans, neighborhood plans, and then regulations contained in the zoning bylaw, subdivision development servicing bylaw, and the building bylaw, which are subject to Part 14 of the Local Government Act. At the provincial level, this includes the BC Building Code and the Agricultural Land Commission Act, both designation and regulations. Application review includes consideration and coordination of all planning, environmental, geotechnical, transportation, engineering, and infrastructure aspects. Local Government Act Section 460 requires a local government to adopt development approval procedures wherever they have adopted an official community plan and a zoning bylaw. So I don't intend to share the details of the project charter that guided the process underway, but I do share this information so that you have confidence that we are in fact following a plan. We established a process and defined our purpose. So we hope that these things will guide us on our way through creating the deliverables of the project, which of course will be documented procedures to ensure improved accountability for work performance, clear protocol for communication between departments in processing development-related applications, and of course a framework to guide the enterprise system construction as we move forward with that important project. The outcomes, most particularly for the Development Approval Procedures Bylaw, is to clarify the relationship between the land use approvals, OCP and zoning amendments, and design approvals, being the development permit end of things, including the requirement that applications be considered concurrently if and when appropriate. So you will recall at the November 24th strategy session, I asked Council to focus on 3 essential questions with respect to laying the foundation for the development approval procedures process. We're really down to 1 remaining question now. To support Council's consideration of that 1 remaining question, we've provided a number of things. Of course, as I mentioned, that proposed procedures bylaw. So that's attachment A to the Council report. I had intended that it showed you a track changes version of the bylaw. But as you can see, once you PDF it, it condenses those track changes into sort of a tab. I'm hoping you've all clicked on those tabs, or that you've had an opportunity to review the bylaw that we circulated this afternoon that showed all the redlining a little bit more clearly. This bylaw satisfies and is consistent with the provisions of Local Government Act Section 460 that requires a local government that has adopted the zoning or OCP by bylaw to define procedures under which a landowner may apply to amend a bylaw or for issuance of a permit in accordance with the plan. So attachment B contains the bylaw comparison table that Council requested to show the similarities and differences between Development Application Procedures Bylaw 99-240 and Development Approval Procedures Bylaw 1133. Delegated development permit applications will continue to be assessed and approved by staff if they satisfy OCP objectives. However, this bylaw expands the approval authority from the Director of Planning and Development to include the Chief Administrative Officer and the Approving Officer for greater business product process continuity, and Council authority for all other DPs remains unchanged. So there's a lot of information. However, the intention is to create a comprehensive understanding. So initially, a written description and a flow chart demonstrating the basic process for applications to be considered by Council was presented on January 19th. This is a copy of that. Included again as attachments C and D to this report for ease of reference. Then Council requested a second flow chart to describe the technical development permit process. So that's those development permits that are delegated to staff for issuance. That flow chart is provided in attachment G. Development Approval Procedures Bylaw 1133 largely reflects the existing application process, but in a more comprehensive way. While it has a distinct Lake Country flavor, it remains consistent with regional norms. The development community has again and again impressed upon staff the need for a reasonable level of regional consistency. This bylaw does that while respecting Lake Country's unique context. The processes themselves are determined by legislation. It is the execution of the processes that can vary from one community to another. Clear and concise communication of the requirements is paramount to establishing good relationships and mutual respect. One of the issues that was raised when Council first considered the bylaw 1133 was the matter of posting notification of development applications on the subject property. Of course, we had dealt with this exact thing earlier this evening. The following excerpt from the British Columbia Planning Law and Practice addresses the posting of notice on land that is subject to a bylaw amendment. It says local governments are expressly authorized by Section 468 of the Local Government Act to require the posting of notice on the land that is subject to a proposed bylaw and to specify the size, form, and content of the notice and the manner in which it is posted. Some local governments achieve consistency in the quality of notice by requiring applicants to use signs provided for that purpose by the local government itself. And in fact, that's what we do. However, the authority to impose these requirements does not extend to permit applications. Bylaw 1133, Section 18, Public Notification and Consultation Requirements, Table 1, Forms of Public Notification and Consultation, has been updated to avoid creating confusion as to when the public input is being sought. I detailed that in my council report, and we can discuss that further if you like. The question becomes, what does council want to see as part of an application submission to assist in the decision-making process? So what we're trying to do here in Schedule B of Bylaw 1133 is spell out the basic application requirements based on regional best practices. We're also really hoping that you'll agree this is a good place to start. Clarity and consistency are two very important aspects of good customer service, whether you're a citizen or a developer. This establishes the base standard. So the Local Government Act provides that in any circumstance, additional relevant information can be requested. However, outlining the application requirements in a way that provides the community confidence of consistency and equitable application of requirements is very, very important. Once we've established a solid foundation, we can then consider things like, do we want to ask for letters of assurance from a landscape architect, similar to how we do from engineers, in subsequent bylaw iterations? For now, it's important to lay the foundation. We can build on it once it's in place. This bylaw shows the community, both citizens and developers, the district is organized and objective in managing the process. The continuity and certainty is beneficial to everyone. To assist council in their assessment of what should be asked for, we focused on the development permits, as these applications are the most varied in the submission requirements specified by the official community plan. The bylaw reflects the basic requirements outlined in the OCP now and provides the opportunity to expand submission requirements as may be required on a case-by-case basis. The comparison tables demonstrate the opportunities available to council through the OCP review process for changes to remove redundancy and potentially to create greater consistency between the permit areas. So while I've provided you those very comprehensive tables, that's just the beginning of the conversation to give you some context for this bylaw now. We recommend that we start here, and certainly, as I said, through the OCP amendment process, we might consider changes in the future. So a report containing referral comments was presented, and you'll see them there. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but I hope that you'll see the comments I've included in the track changes version of the bylaw attempt to address anything that was raised. We are hoping that completion of the project will provide a solid foundation, as I've said again and again, for implementing the policy and bylaw changes anticipated through a staged, comprehensive zoning bylaw review and an OCP review. The terms of reference for professional reports and studies will be able to be used far more effectively once we've got this greater framework in place. So This is what we hope will answer council's vision for moving forward. Once the development approval procedures bylaw and terms of reference policy are confirmed, of course, through second and third readings this evening, we will be in a position then to bring the bylaw back for consideration of adoption. And then we'll go away to create up-to-date, well-illustrated, plain language development guideline brochures, propose amendments to the zoning bylaw in accordance with some of the requests that we've received, both from council and that we've identified as staff. We're going to update and strengthen the technical form and character guidelines contained in the OCP, hopefully as a separate project at a later date. And then, of course, we're going to update our internal procedures. And I've provided you an example there, not so much for you to have input on how we carry out the internal process, but to give you a window into our world and show you how I'm then translating the information contained in the schedules of the bylaw to the actual process as we carry out our business on a day-to-day basis, showing who's responsible for each of the tasks and activities and creating that ongoing consistency. So hopefully, as I say, this gets us a little further down the road. I'm happy to take any questions and try to answer any inquiries that you may have. Otherwise, that concludes my comments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for that presentation. So one thing that I get quite often said to me is when somebody, an applicant is coming into our office to apply and follow this. It's great that we're going through this internally to do this. But is there something that we can do so that when they show up, they can also get the framework to what our steps are? Because that is definitely something that I get. I take a lot of, I'm not going to say they're all complaints, but a lot of concerns with how confusing it is on our end, right? So that would be great if, you go through all this and then we can really make it easy for somebody walking through that front door that hasn't dealt with us regularly.
Absolutely, that's the purpose. I need to get your concurrence with the general outline, and then we can go away and create some more user-friendly information. Certainly, there's lots of opportunity and lots of different ways we can try to deliver that information in a better way than we have more recently. So I think historically we had that kind of information, but for some reason it dropped off. And we have the opportunity to revive that again. So yes, absolutely, that's what we want to do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anybody else? Councillor Reid.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Corey, for that presentation. We are still seeing your screen at the moment, if there's any chance of there we go. There. It's beautiful, lovely pink, thank you. Thank you for putting together that huge amount of paperwork and giving us every angle to look at it. My one tiny little is that we still have the TUP renewal. We used to have a sign up to say that it was going to be renewed, and as per the original application, so the original when the first TUP goes through, temporary use permit goes through, there's a sign and a notice to the I think the surrounding neighborhood, but that has now been changed on the renewal, so there is neither a notice posted on the property nor notice to the neighborhood. And I just, forgive me, I may have forgotten why we went through this, but I was from a community engagement, community awareness, which we were talking about earlier today. I would still have liked to have seen us have a sign for the renewal process as much as for the TUP, because then the wording has it for me as in temporary, and implying that we're not going to notify neighbours when there is a renewal. It seems to detract a little bit from that temporary status.
Gotcha, Bill.
I think, Mr. Mayor, if I might respond to that, for consistency with the types of permits, being that it's a permit, so similar to a development permit where we can't receive input, I was trying to create, I guess, consistency amongst the permit types rather than with the zoning, but certainly we can do that. We just have to be very careful that we don't create expectations when there's really not an opportunity for input.
But I would say with the temporary use permit, there is opportunity for input. And when looking at the table, which is on, forgive me, page, hold on a second, 17 of the red line document, when we issue a temporary use permit, there is a development notice sign and neighbor consultation. So it seems to be consistent, or it seems to be allowed if it's a temporary use permit. But in the temporary use permit renewal, we have removed the development notice sign and neighborhood consultation. So we're not being consistent within the class of permit of temporary use.
Oh, all right. That may be an oversight. We can certainly make that change.
Right. And my one second other comment was when we talked about the flow chart, we were looking at the public hearing, and I don't know whether it's captured in that box, which but allowing staff to feed back onto the public hearing. So when the public raises questions, providing some way of answering those questions. And there is no engagement from staff in the third reading, as far as I can tell from that flowchart. So I'm just wondering how that would be accomplished.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I believe that if questions were raised at the public hearing, we would certainly try to answer them as best as we could at that time. Similarly, we can report back to council. We just have to be very careful about the timing of our response back in terms of receiving new information after the public hearing. So we can provide clarification, but we can't provide new information. But certainly, anytime we have an opportunity to provide feedback either to council or the public, we can make an effort to do so for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, because in previous council hearings, public hearings, the comments have been received from the public, but then there has been no feedback or response from staff as part of the public hearing process. It's kind of, we listen and that's it. There's no response from staff to any of the concerns raised or issues raised at the public hearing during the public hearing. Jamie.
Jamie, just lit Jamie's fire.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't take much. I'm planning is what I live for. But in terms of this, it is that funny position, right? Where public hearings are not the ideal process for solid public engagement. Ideally, on good land use planning exercises, we're doing that much in advance of the public hearing, and the public hearing is the last opportunity, the legislated minimum, right? In these cases, and I do empathize and I understand where council is coming from in this regard. With a public hearing, it would be probably problematic for us to put it into a bylaw in a way that speaks to the overall legislation in the Local Government Act in terms of the process for renewal and how to get people to speak to it, or sorry, whether it's a temporary use permit or a public hearing for a rezoning, for example. One thing that I would advise council on, and we can get more clear on this in the future, is if there are substantial questions that come up at the time of a public hearing and staff have to go back, and what we're going to do is end up not just providing clarifications, but new information, then I think we've got to get comfortable in terms of this public process and going, staff as well, I mean, in terms of going, hey, here's some new information. What we recommend as a result is take this back, rescind second reading, or give it second reading again if you so wish, and then have another public hearing now that we've addressed those new issues. And so we can do that. It's just a fine balance of how you deal with that, given the fact that it's so legislated. But I do understand that, and I'm taking mental notes in terms of how we can follow up for subsequent rezonings, slightly outside of this this process itself. But I figured I'd take the second to give you some of my thoughts on it.
Okay,
You want
thank
to
you.
respond, Corey? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, you know, as a future iteration to the process, there is the potential for us to think about expanding our public consultation that happens ahead of the legislative process. This was sort of the first stab in terms of, you know, sort of instructing people, go talk to your neighbors, but we could beef up that front end of that consultation process once we sort of got our feet under ourselves and we get comfortable with, you know, what circumstances do we think we should ask developers to hold public information meetings and those kinds of things. So we can expand those things once we've got the foundation in place. Some communities require much more and some communities require much less. So we've just got to find our sweet spot.
Thank you. Councillor Scarrow.
No, sir, I'm just sitting here listening.
Well, don't wave your hand around while you're
Well, I've
listening.
got a desk right here. It's a good place to put my hand. It holds up my head.
Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the report. And I'm not sure if this fits into this particular thing right now here, or if there's a solution, but Councillor Reid's comments reminded me of something to do with public hearings. And, you know, we're talking about when we receive new information, or that we can't receive new information. But we've had several issues where we've had the public hearing and then all the information changes and the public doesn't hear about it. Because there's, you know, such as Rogers Road, you know, where we had a public hearing, the concept was presented, and then the densities and the concept completely changed. And the people were trying to speak to it, but they couldn't because we'd already had the public hearing. And the public hearing took place, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years before this happened. And it seemed to me that this is the sort of thing that completely undermines public's trust in government. You know, we've had a public hearing, we've told them that they're going to be a bunch of 2-story townhouses, and then we end up with 3 or 4-story buildings and massively increased density. And you know, the average guy doesn't care that there's a rule out there. He just says, this is why I don't trust you. I don't know if this is, you know, this might not be the right place to address this, but you know, we've talked about it, but we've never been presented with any kind of solution going forward or any kind of discussion going forward. And so I refuse to let go of it until we have that.
Jamie?
And it's all Kara Reid's fault. I just might add that.
Jamie?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. You can see in between comments, I've taken the suit jacket off. I don't want to step on Corey's toes in terms of speaking to aligning development permits with zoning. There are some intricacies to the process in terms of what we're trying to get better at the staff level in terms of when you're making a zoning decision, providing you not only the site concept that is provided, but in fact, what's the total development potential? And it's a bit of a gray area. We can't necessarily, but you know, sometimes the site concept at zoning is so hypothetical that it may or may not be delivered on the ground when the time comes to actually do the development permit. In fact, development permits are only valid for a period of 2 years. And then, you know, subsequently someone could come in and do something entirely different. You know, hypothetically, let's say someone brings in a zoning application and they're looking to do townhouses, but the land use somehow also allows boat storage. They come in with a site concept that shows townhomes, and then 3 years later they deliver a boat storage place and a fenced yard. Very, very different in terms of what council was told at the time and what people considered. And so staff are working on a process by which we can provide you more of the broad picture in terms of what does this possibility actually mean for the community in the long term, because the land use decision is really where that density decision is made, and understanding it at that stage is really integral. So in those cases, you know, it's a tough position to be in, and I completely understand how council could be and the community could be disappointed in that regard. when something is disconnected. There's the potential also to align development permits with the zoning requirement. Now the trade-off to that is, while you may legally be able to do it, there is some challenge to some of the intricacies of that. It also may increase that the overall cost of entry for development becomes, well, absolutely, I can provide development permit drawings, and I'm well capitalized enough that I can wait 2 years until I can subsequently let that one lapse and submit a new one, now that I have the land use rights. And that's the fine logistics of some of this, right? I won't go into it too much, but that's a little bit around it, and we are working better, as I said, to try to provide council that big picture of the weight of that land use decision at the time.
Okay.
My comment back to you would be that.
Got Councillor Gamble first.
Yeah, can I just respond back?
Thanks. I just wanted to say that I think that.
Crying out loud, guys.
I have had my hand up for a long time.
Yeah, I hadn't finished my comment. So I just wanted to go back and make it.
Well, I haven't had a chance.
As you often do, and other people do.
Well, we'll leave it to the chair.
Yeah, no,
you go ahead.
I thought Councillor Blair had finished but then Jamie raised issues he hadn't finished. So go ahead, Councillor.
Go ahead, Penny.
Well, if neither, you're going to go, Carol.
Well, I will. I actually think that Corey Gain has done a very good job listening to what council has had to say. I do think that that temporary use permit, that was excellent that you picked that up. Whether it was an oversight or not, I think it is very important that we be consistent with what we've done in the past, because I think we're all about that kind of public input. And I am keen to see this move forward. I certainly would be willing to move second reading. I don't know if people are prepared for third reading at this point. I think that we would like to see this move ahead, because I am keen to see the development of the brochure and the information, to get that out to the public, so that they can actually have much more information that's easy to understand, so that we don't have these mistakes or errors. I do have a question, and I didn't see it. I know that we did talk about, I don't know if it actually fits in here, but I know that there have been covenants placed on properties over the years, different times, to control their use, the use of that land. And I know that council has removed those covenants without a public process. And I think I've asked that question before. It concerned me, and I know it's come back many times to me in one particular area on the lakes there, where council removed a covenant from an area, and now that area is for sale again, and looks like there's going to be quite a big development. And unfortunately, where the access to that Lake Hill Drive is treacherous, and we've set it up for a really dangerous situation. Anyways, I don't know if we can include that or if that fits in here, so I would just ask that question.
Go ahead, Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't think that the conversation about covenants and when it's appropriate to use them fits in the development approval procedures, but it's absolutely a conversation that we should have with respect to which tools should be used in which circumstances.
Yes.
And in fact, we at the staff level are working on some additional resources so that we can have a more robust conversation with you as council about which is the most appropriate tool to use in which circumstance. So in fact, if you were to come by my office, I can show you how I've got started on that. And I know that there are others that have things on their walls that are of a similar kind of a thing, where we're hoping to be able to have a better conversation and talk that through. But that'll be separate from this.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I have
Yeah.
to talk online though. I have Councillor Arlen.
No, I'm done.
Forget your thoughts. Councillor Scarrow.
Move second and third reading, sir.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'd like to add Councillor Gamble's comment on that covenant. My understanding, it's a public process when a covenant is removed. I don't know how it could have been removed without. Can I get an answer? Quick answer, Jamie? You do?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I think in that regard, that one was tied to a process that is a legal matter. So it is complicated by that proceeding. However, it is, without getting into it too much, it's a good case study of why covenants are a poor land use tool. Because when people look at their properties and they're purchasing properties and they're making investment decisions and people are making decisions even whereabouts they will be living, they're making those decisions based, not always, but in some cases on the zoning. And very rarely are they pulling their neighbor's property title and reading the covenant documents. And we've had cases in the past where covenants have attempted to restrict density, height, or even subsequent uses that then conflict with the zoning bylaw. It's a real case study of how not to do land use, and it's also one of the main reasons why on a parallel matter we're looking to remove land use contracts by 2024. So it's a very interesting one. I can't get into the logistics of that specific file on this bylaw matter.
Okay, Todd, did that trigger something for you?
Yeah, I would like to get clarification, just so everybody understands the difference between reading the second and the third. Because if I heard Bill correctly there, he wants second and third.
Correct.
Can you just clarify the difference? Because I just want to make sure public gets the ability to talk on this one for sure.
Can you do that, Corey?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we, following first reading, we posted all of this information on our website. So it was available for the public to provide their comments if they had any. I didn't receive any. This is not the type of bylaw that requires a public hearing process. So I'll let Raina respond further, but.
Okay, Raina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because there's no requirement in this bylaw for ministry approval or public comment opportunity other than what council would like to see, the only difference between second and third is council can only amend the bylaw at second. So if you give it second and third tonight and there were further amendments that council wanted to see, you would have to rescind third and read it a second time as amended. And that can all be done at the same meeting. So there's really no difference other than it shows council's intent on moving forward with it. And it would take another meeting to give it third and then adoption. Whereas at the next meeting, if you wanted, you could adopt it. So it adds a bit of time.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Councillor Reid?
Sorry, can I just clarify whether that tweak to the TUP renewal can be included in this, or does it need to follow the second and then come back for a third? I mean, if it can be included, I'm very happy to see it included.
Raina can confirm, but I believe that we can certainly make that adjustment to the text to be considered as amended, yes.
Right, okay, so that's what the amended text is what we're approving as second and third. Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to seeing the zoning amendments coming through and that the strategy session leading on from Councillor Arlen's comments.
Those in favour? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
All right. Some great guns here. Where are we? Tax related bylaws. Tax rates bylaws. Who's doing that?
That's me.
Oh, you.
Okay, so I have a quick presentation. I'll see if I can get it up here for council. Can council see that?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. See if I can get my slideshow working. There we go. Okay, so really quickly through tax rates, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to talk to council about. So why do we consider tax rates? There's a requirement in legislation to determine the distribution of property taxes amongst various property tax classes. Certainly council expressed an interest in looking at business class versus some of the other classes. There's always consideration of fairness and equity in terms of tax rates. There was a legal example a few years ago. Back in 2009, there was a large pulp and paper mill that brought a lawsuit against a couple of different municipalities, including Campbell River and North Cowichan. Some of you may recall the Catalyst paper situation. Anyway, that was a class 4 property that was really concerned about the amount of taxes that they were paying. One of the things that came out of that lawsuit, though, was that the judge stated that how important it is for local governments to consider tax rates and the distribution of tax rates amongst the different classes. They were not successful in their bid to overturn the tax rate bylaw because the court certainly saw a very limited view for them to be able to overturn tax rate bylaws. But there was an emphasis on how important it is for council to consider tax distribution when tax rates come in front of them. At the end of the day, when we look at all these different tax rates, really there's no wrong answers in whatever council decides to go with. It's really about the consideration piece. There's lots of groups that are really interested in this. I think you've probably seen articles from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So there's lots of groups out there that follow these tax rates. So a quick look at our assessment roll. As we all know, we sit with about just over 95% of our roll is residential. Given the size of our residential class, as we add to that class, it obviously starts to erode the value of the rest of the classes within it. So you can see that the business classes dropped as a percentage of the roll, so we went from 3.74 down to 3.5. But the amount of growth that we've had in residential just kind of dwarfs the growth everywhere else. So we talk a lot about multipliers and tax ratios. What is a multiplier? So if residential is considered 1, it's basically the multiple of that another class pays. So a 2-to-1 ratio, for example, would be that another class paid twice as much as what the residential class is. What's the difference between a tax multiplier and a tax ratio? Nothing. It's the same terminology. It's really used interchanged in not only the legislation, but on the provincial websites as well. You'll see it. There is some discretion in setting multipliers. There's also some legislation around multipliers. So for example, class 2 utilities is restricted or capped at the greater of $40 per thousand, or 2.5 times the business rate. Also for Lake Country, our letters patent limit the farm class 9 to the provincial rate, which is currently 55 cents per thousand. The other side of what we look at is really what is the percentage of tax collected from each class. And that's kind of how much does each of the class pay of the total pie. We have complete discretion if that's what we're going to consider as far as how much each class collects or how much we collect from each class. But I think it's important to note that we should be considering multiple variables. You can't look at any one of these variables, whether it be ratios or percentage of tax collected, and consider them in isolation. They need to be considered together. So there's lots of examples. So for example, in the case of Campbell River in North Cowichan, the multipliers were high, absolutely, much higher than ours, for example, for the class 4. But in some cases, the class 4 property, and there'd be one of the class 4 properties, so Catalyst paper, would pay 40% of the tax bill. So while the multiplier didn't seem too bad, they were footing almost half of the entire tax bill, which is a huge problem once those businesses go away. So I think it's important to consider both. So when I looked at the tax rates, I considered 3 different scenarios. The first scenario was just no adjustment. So it's a straight calculation. We figure out how much we need, and then there's a calculation based on the amount of assessment, and we come up with a calculated rate. The second scenario looked at adjusting the classes to the average. So that was something that was considered last year and passed. Council passed multipliers that were equated to the 5-year average for classes 5, 6, and 8. And then I considered further reducing the burden on 6 and moving it to the provincial multiplier of 2.45 to 1 for that class. So the province has a set of multipliers that we use to actually calculate things like our regional district taxes or our hospital taxes. So that multiplier is 2.45 for business. So I applied that in the third scenario. So you would have saw this in your package. I definitely showed you what it would look like from a single family residence perspective if we started pushing the burden around. And in a second, I'm actually going to show you what it looks like on a class 6 property as well. But for the class 1 property, you can see that in scenario 1, which is just the calculated one actually saw a push of the burden over to business just because business had a larger percentage growth than residential. So in scenario 2, we pushed that obviously back with some of the averages, and the average house would have seen about a not quite $17 increase there. And then in scenario 3, where there was the further push off of the business class, there was another $4.50 approximately increase for that. But what I didn't show you, and I should have added, I thought of after, and so I said in this presentation, I'm going to show you, what does it look like on a business property? So here's a class 6 business. There's 200 properties in the class 6 business. I just took the total amount of assessment and divided it by 200 properties. The average value turned out to be $860,000. So what does this taxes look like on the average business property? So you can see under scenario 1, it was about $7,100. So that push over to the averages, you can see drop that average property from $7,100 to $6,600. So that's a pretty significant drop. That is in the neighborhood of about $500. So we saw on the residential side that push created about a $17 increase on the average household, creates about a $500 decrease on the average business. And then the further push to the 2.45 ratio created an amount of $64.74, which again was about another $150 off of that. So for council's consideration tonight, there was 3 scenarios, and I have equated those scenarios to what the resolutions look like. So scenario 1 was just the calculated multipliers, that is option C. Scenario 2, which was the average multipliers, was resolution option A. And scenario 3, which reduced the class 6 multiplier again, was option B. So I will stop sharing here, and we will see if we can get everybody back. There we go. So I will leave that for council's consideration, and I can answer any questions that may be available.
Anybody has any questions? Totally clear. Councillor Ireland.
Just reading today that the average house price in the central Okanagan is now $120,000 more than that. But that's just right now.
Yeah.
Is that going to affect anything here? And that's average house price in the retail market, obviously.
Yeah, so through your worship, market plays a role in calculation. That market price isn't going to hit our tax rates right now. We won't see that until this time next year when you guys are considering tax rates, because the assessment values that we get are as of the market value on July the 31st. So assuming that rates stay, our housing prices stay similar, we'll see a pretty big jump in our market probably as of July 31st. Now, we do take into consideration market increases though. So we have a set amount of money that we need to collect, and market is taken into consideration when we do the calculations. So and it's all dependent on the average market increase within their class. If you increased way more than the average, then you'll pay more. If you increased less, then you pay less. You can see though, I mean, that overall, we definitely take into consideration market. Our straight up mill rate has decreased over last year. So our mill rate last year was $2.50 for residential, and this year it's $2.47. So that is recognizing that there is absolutely market increase and that our mill rates need to go down to reflect that market increase.
So the market increase, you know, this market increase we're talking right now is residential. Is there a corresponding increase in business? Because, I mean, what's driving it is the residential market. So I don't know that a business, I mean, other than the fact that the bricks and mortar are bricks and mortar, just like they're in a house, I don't know if the value of those businesses is correspondingly increasing.
So I would suggest, and you know, this is all about assessment and how they value the properties, but the value of land has increased. So regardless of whether that's business land or residential land, that we will see an increase across the board on land, recognizing that landing costs impact everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my questions would be the difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2. Seeing it presented, it was great to have the breakdown from the report because I was getting a bit lost. So I appreciate the PowerPoint. I suppose my one question would be, with scenario 2, the business sees a reduction, but the residential properties are going to see an increase, which you know, I don't know the percentages in Lake Country, but how many of our businesses employ local people? So, you know, it's benefiting the business owners, but then the employees of that business will see a potential increase in their slight increase in their property tax, obviously spread over a wider basis. So I thinking scenario 3 is just too much for me at the moment. I think that's quite 10% drop is quite significant. So I'm wavering on this, and I'm feeling that for me scenario 1 is status quo at the moment, is where I'm feeling happiest. And I noticed there was also a second question about returning to the general municipal tax scheme as well, which I wondered whether we needed to have a resolution on today as well in terms of returning to those traditional dates.
Thank you, through the mayor. So absolutely, it is a push. So there's a certain amount of money to be collected at the end of the day, and somebody's paying it, and whether it's distributed more to business or more to residential, or somebody's going to have to pay it absolutely at the end of the day. But in regards to your second question regarding the general municipal tax scheme, so by default, all local governments or all municipalities fall into the general municipal tax scheme. We have to adopt a bylaw that actually sets out something else if that's what we're going to do. And that's what we did last year, is we created a bylaw for 2020 that set out different tax due dates and collection dates and whatnot. This year, we've brought forward a tax bylaw that supports the general municipal tax scheme, which is what we by default fall into. I can tell you that I would suggest most of the municipalities around the province have absolutely returned to the general municipal tax scheme. There was a lot of administrative work associated with changing due dates and increasing the number of tax penalty dates and things that we had. So I would say pretty exclusively across the province, we are seeing everybody returning to the general municipal rates. Anything that most municipalities did in relation to COVID-19 relief was really around adjusting tax rates, and mostly in business classes. We saw a lot of that in the Lower Mainland this year. So.
Yeah, I got Councillor Gamble, Councillor Scarrow, Councillor Ireland. Councillor Gamble, you're up.
Thank you.
So I favor B, which is that the tax multiplier with the assessment class 6 being set equal to the provincial tax ratio for that class of 2.45 to 1, which we just heard explained. I think that was a great explanation and something that we haven't done before, as far as I know, in our community. But we do have a large block of currently unpopulated land that has potential for development. And I think the timing is really apropos for kind of, you know, extending the welcome in a sense, in a small sense, very minor, but overall, these things can send a message. And as far as our community having 95% residential, to me, that makes us very vulnerable and very, you know, focused on being like a bedroom community, not a sustainable community. And to me, diversification of the economy is number one in creating that balance, the long-term sustainability of this community. Not to mention, it gives much more livability to our community, where we can actually live and work in our community, not spend all our day on the road going to Kelowna, Vernon, or wherever. So I am very supportive of B, but I'd like to hear what the others think.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Scarrow.
And thank you. My microphone's on. I'm okay. Tanya, I might be a little confused. I really like what Councillor Gamble had to say and all of her points that she touched on. But I thought it was option C that reduced the business tax on an average property by 500 and increased the residential tax on an average property by 17. Or is that option B?
That is option B.
Then I completely agree with Councillor Gamble. Mark it down.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, no, I disagree. I'm more with Councillor Reid. I think status quo at the moment. We're coming out of a tough year. That's a tough year for the smallest people. So, you know, I can appreciate that we want to be friendly to business, but before we start going to lower taxation for the businesses, I'd want to see some reports, see how competitive we are. Are we just lowering our rates because we think we're not competitive? Because I just don't believe that's the case.
I got you, Kevin.
So, yeah, I'm totally not in support of that. I'm in favor of status quo for this year. I'm certainly open to looking at it for future years, but I'd want to have a lot more information looking at how competitive we are, what taxation is like for those businesses in, you know, Kelowna's well, I mean, we can't compete with Kelowna's industrial parks, but again, there is no commercial land anywhere. We don't have any light industrial. So until that comes on stream, we're not competitive with Kelowna. Yeah, I think the status quo is important because I think that's where the most amount of people are going to be hurting. And, you know, 95% of our taxation comes from those houses. That's a lot. And I can appreciate we want to diversify, but I don't think lowering the taxes on the business and raising it on the houses is the way to go this year.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Sorry,
You're on mute.
sorry. Thank you. And I think Councillor Gamble's point is well made about supporting business, but I also agree with Councillor Ireland. I don't think this is the place quite to do it just yet. I think we have opportunities when we're looking at the zoning bylaw, and Councillor Kosa brought in a notion of motion to look at how we can make that live-work balance work better. So maybe we don't have the big industrial areas of Kelowna, but through our zoning bylaw and the OCP, maybe we can make that small business functionality work better for our community by allowing people to have more opportunity to work from home and to maybe encourage developments that have that live-work balance with residential and commercial as blended units. And to me, that's where I can see a more, maybe just a more impactful supportive business on a real terms, rather than this particular decision at this particular time.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do agree with that last comment. That's definitely the way I'm thinking on it as well. I think we need more information before we go and adjust the business taxes. And I'm all for welcoming businesses, and I want to see them succeed. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse in this one. So I think we need to do our homework before we go on adjusting that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hearing none, I'll take a motion. Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, motion that it's the status quo, option A.
Option C.
Option C.
Sorry. Option C.
I get confused.
And Councillor Reid, second. Any further discussion?
Well,
Those, Councillor Gamble?
yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that I understand what people are saying, because it is a tough year. But I think that in a year like this, even more so, we need to consider business in our community. And, I guess, I mean, I think that we compete in all of the province, but for sure we compete in the Okanagan. And there's very few places where we actually can help, sort of reach out to business in any way. We're not permitted to give subsidies of any kind. There is one place that we can actually make a difference, and this is through the taxes. So that's where it's still coming from.
Yeah, thank you. Just in counter to that, though, the more population we have, the more likely we will get businesses that can survive here and not spend their money in Kelowna or Vernon because we don't have the business here that could get the money. So I too support the status quo, but I'll hear from Councillor Ireland and Councillor Scarrow, and then we'll go ahead, Blair.
Yeah, I think Councillor Scarrow was before me.
Please, Bill, there, you deserve it. You deserve a break. Go.
No, you were up ahead of me, buddy.
All I wanted to say was
whose hand I see before, but if you go ahead, one or the other of you.
In respect to Councillor Gamble's comments, which I appreciated, I'm not so much worried about growing our commercial base. I'm a little bit worried about retaining what commercial base we have after the year. Now, a $400 or $500 savings by a business, in my opinion, isn't cutting and hacking away at our tax base, but it would provide relief for those 200 existing commercial properties that Tanya talked about. As far as Blair saying that the lowest and littlest people in our community are the ones that are going to be affected, of course that's true. But if you look at the homeowners as 100% in Lake Country, I would suggest that perhaps less than 10% of those would fit into that category. The other 90% have $1 million homes and lots of disposable income, in my opinion. So you can shake your head, but that's my opinion. So I don't plan on supporting this motion.
The status quo. Okay.
Okay, so it's my turn.
Pardon?
So I completely disagree with you, Bill.
Of course.
On,
I like
on
that.
several levels.
I like that.
There's some businesses that are hurting, for sure. I don't see a lot of them being destroyed. This is not like Vancouver. This is not like Toronto. Right? I don't think, our major businesses, let's face it, our major businesses, they're grocery stores. and they're making out like bandits. The hardware store is making out like a bandit. So let's not think that every business is out there getting hammered. Sure, there's some that are, absolutely. But to go off and do something like this requires some knowledge, and we don't have that knowledge, and we haven't done that homework. And without doing that, there's no way that I could support that. We know right now that the status quo and the smallest people, and you know, to say that 90% of the people live in $1 million homes, you know, they live in $1 million homes because there's 20% of these homes are dragging up the cost of everything else.
But they
necessarily can't afford to be in those homes. They can't sell them. They can't replace them. They can't get out of them because there's nothing to buy. So, you know, I don't think that's a very fair comment. There's lots of people who are hurting right now that are at the low end of the totem pole and not working. So, you know, I think the mayor said it well. The more we can get people to live here, the more chance we have of getting business. But giving them a subsidy like this without doing the homework, I'm completely supportive of looking to do something like this in the future, provided we do the homework. And we have.
Yeah, I think it's not the time either. But when we actually have some land that we can be competitive with in offering for industrial or commercial, then we can look at setting tax rates that might make it more attractive without having to give a whole lot of incentive to businesses that quite often fail because they think they they don't have a good business case in the first place. So no, I think that I'm not adverse to being a 95% residential property tax community, because most of the communities in British Columbia, their biggest is residential property tax, but except those places that have single industry or a whole lot of industry and are a whole lot bigger than we are. But and you can see what happens to those places when you try to get too much tax from them. They just go somewhere else. But anyway, I have a motion for.
Can I speak?
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't have you down here, Todd. Go ahead.
So when I look at this one, just a question for Tanya. To me, it doesn't seem like we have all the information to do this decision properly. It seems to be the biggest issue, right? As far as the business-wise go. Do you think that we could possibly defer this? Do we have time to defer this in order to come up with that information and do this all at once? And then that seemed to me would make give everybody the proper information, because currently we do not have it, and we're trying to make a decision, and residential wise, that's fine, but business wise, we're not making the decision with all the information on the table. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, Tanya.
Okay.
Yeah. So through your worship, you know, given the amount of time that we have, and this bylaw needs to be adopted by May the 14th, I would suggest that without a scope even of the amount of what kind of information would be required, I'd suggest that we wouldn't be able to go back and find out all of that information prior to the adoption of this bylaw. Okay. If that was if council was interested in that, however, I would suggest that a separate motion to look at this prior to next year would definitely be required, because then we could do some work around the scope of what would be needed for information to council for them to make a decision around moving that tax rate.
Okay, no, I'm just curious if we had the time. If we don't have the time, to me, it's pretty simple decision for me at this point. Thank you.
We can certainly have a resolution to put that on the priority to look at for before tax time next year. Those in favor? We were option C, was it? Ready the first, second, and third time. Opposed? Those Councillor Scarroll and Gamble opposed, and motion carries. Thank you. strategic priorities quarterly update.
Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor and Council. Good evening. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'll try to be quick and rather leave time for questions or clarifications from Council. But we usually have an annual update of strategic priorities that happens towards the end of the year. And then we try to have a quarterly update to keep monitoring, I guess, the strategic priorities that we approve in that annual update. So the last update in 2021 actually will be the traditional annual update, at which time we're going to have a major discussion and consideration of what are the current priorities, whether or not we need to review them, whether or not we need to establish that other priorities are needed, or some of those that we have need to be changed or amended. But for this particular one that you have in front of you, this is our first quarter priority review, which considers the priorities that were actually completed since October 2020, and how the new priority list looks like, basically, which is attached to your report as attachment A. So just for a quick run through the report, the priorities that have been completed since October 2020 are the approval of Mobility Master Plan. We have completed the Employee Engagement Survey. We also have approved and it's been implemented as we speak, an IT strategy. We completed the code of conduct review and also the organizational capacity of the district. Now, we do not look at the capital projects that are underway and that have been approved as part of the budget process. So if the public or members of council need to review those, they can be found on the district's website. But after the process of reviewing the priorities with the directors and removing those that have been completed, the main council priorities proposed with this update are the wastewater master plan, the water master plan review, the forest and vegetation strategy, the zoning bylaw update, the economic development strategy, the integrated community sustainability plan review, and the official community plan review. All the actions are identified next to each priority, and an update will be provided to council possibly in June or July of this year as the second quarter review. There are three options for council. One is to approve the priorities list attached to the report, and or that the strategic priorities list be referred back to staff in case you wish to see other things in that list that need to be changed as part of the discussion we're going to have, I guess, or that we defer this further to the second quarter. There's a typo there, it's March 2021, it's actually June or July 2021.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alberto. I'm just going to, it was just a little inconsistency there with the report to the council on the economic development strategy. In the high level, it says June, but in the departmental, it says April. So obviously April's passed. And I know when we met, and maybe Director Fader can chime in on this, when the economic development committee met, we also talked about integrating or learning from the work that's been going on the ICSP. So sustainability in the sense of economic development. And so I don't know whether that would need to have time to happen before coming back to council with a draft. Our next meeting is scheduled of that committee till June. So I'm just wondering whether that's quite a tight schedule that we're setting to come back to council with a draft economic development strategy.
So we're going to have an ICSP review strategy session on May the 25th, at which point we will discuss the discussion paper that I'm putting together this time, and also the scope of the project, I guess. The only concern I have, if we needed to have committees being involved, is somewhat problematic with the timing, as we're trying to wrap this up before we actually start the OCP, because the OCP needs to be informed from or by the new section 1 of the ICSP. Anyhow, that's the discussion we can have certainly on May the 25th when I bring forward the ICSP review. Now, that's not going to be the draft of the ICSP. It's going to be the discussion paper. So the desire here is basically to sort out the major hotspots, I guess, that we need to discuss, which are contained in the discussion paper, so that I can have the information and direction that I need in order to draft the new document for council consideration.
Okay. Matt, will you going to speak to this? Priorities?
In terms of the ICSP, I think, as Alberto said, they'll be brought forward to council for discussion paper there. I think that the task that we have with the economic development strategy is a little bit different, and we've already undertaken this, so it's kind of hard to change gears and just completely switch the focus to sustainability. I understand, and I do remember the conversation Councillor Reid had on that. I think those integrations, so when we look at the pillars of council, including economics and the economy, I think that's under the actual ICSP rather than economic development strategy. So that's for council's discussion with Alberto on the 25th of the scope of engagement, we'll call it, I guess, of where council would like to see that go to make sure that the timelines can match that. But the actual economic development strategy really isn't intended to be that overarching. It's more targeted in terms of a few tactics, is where we started with this when we went to those, rather than the whole sustainability part. I think ICSP captures that at that high level in a better way.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. What's your desire? Anybody do the motion?
I'll approve it. Motion, nominate, what is?
That would be option A, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the seconder? Councillor Gamble? Any further discussion? Those in favor?
I am.
Opposed? And opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah. The fire protection local service area amendment bylaw. You're moving that, Councillor McKenzie? All your people.
Sure, I'll move it.
Okay.
Second.
And Councillor Allen, second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. They're protected. They always were, but they just weren't paying for it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Report from in camera. Is that happening? Those people that were appointed to the remuneration task force, that's been done, right? And now we're making it public? I thought it was public.
Yes, through the mayor. This is just for information, bringing it forward to the regular council meeting agenda from the camera agenda.
You don't need a resolution to declassify?
That's correct. It was declassified at the in-camera meeting.
Okay.
And then is brought forward on this agenda for public information.
Okay, then that's there. And after which time their membership shall expire, as soon as they give us a report. Council committees, we don't need those. Board of Education meeting Do you have anything for the Board of Information? You know, this is we do a joint agenda. I did, I think, ask Willeen to add see if the school district could provide an electric vehicle charging station on their property. We're trying to get some on our property here, but I wondered if there are any teenagers driving electric cars, or would it make them drive electric cars, or that parking lot's full quite often, and I wondered if that's an item we want to raise with the school district. It comes out of our money anyway, but if it's on the school budget instead of our budget, because the local taxpayers pay to the school district. So nobody has any say? No highlights from their education? We are, can't remember, we are going to have a joint board and council meeting, but there don't seem to be a whole lot of things to talk about, except maybe where they might put another school. Councillor items. I'll start with Councillor Ireland. He thinks I ignore him all the time. But you're up, Blair.
Yeah, you do though. There's no thinking about it. I don't have much, but just a message to the community. We have seen a number of incidents of people removing trees from road right-of-ways, trees that don't belong to them, trees that belong to the community. And rather than this, sort of thing of people respecting the environment and these incidences slowing down, they're actually accelerating. And there's more and more and more people doing this. So just be aware that we are watching these things. The road guys are being quite vigilant about it. And there's been a number of incidences in my neighborhood where these trees have come down, and there's been consequences. So let's respect the fact that these trees don't belong to you. They might be actually holding up a road, and the community needs trees. We all need trees, and I mean we need to hurry up along our tree bylaw, but we need this vegetation to survive. So if it's not on your property, don't cut it down.
Gotcha. Councillor McKenzie.
Because you ignore me too, or what?
Actually, it was my turn to go first.
The way you're on my screen.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just teasing. So a couple of things. I do agree with Councillor Ireland. I've even had, and I brought it to council before, where somebody's removed trees on district land to improve their view, and then had the gall to actually approach us in that we should come clean them up. And that kind of stuff is not cool by any means, and I will point that out every time I see that. So I do think people need to respect the process, and hopefully they leave those trees in place that so many of us like there. So so I'll get off the soapbox there. I do have a very large concern though, in that, and I'm not sure what is going on, but Wood Lake is, I went by it this morning, and the algae bloom there seems to be getting worse, and it was probably a good, I'm going to say 20 meters out, that you couldn't even see water. It was literally green on top. And then the next 20 meters, maybe 30 meters, you could see it was cloudy. So that pours straight into Cal Lake, which is our water source there. I'm not sure how many take their water directly out of Wood Lake. But I'm going to press the panic button on this one because I don't think that's going to be drinkable water here pretty quick if that keeps going. I'm not sure, you know, in my 30 years in the valley here, I've never seen it that bad. I've seen tiny little blooms, but this one seems to be going a lot longer, and even with the waves, it's not dispersing. So I'm not exactly sure what's causing it. I'm not the water expert, Jeremy. So it's water biologist, obviously, is what we need here. I would be wanting to get that water tested because, you know, my dog wanted to run into it today, and I'm, you know, dragging my feet along the sand trying to keep him out of it because I'm pretty sure that's not healthy for a pet, let alone anybody, a little kid or anybody going into there. So I would want us to, if possible, if we can get some testing done, some proper testing on that water to see what, and see if we can figure out what's going on, because that's odd that it's come on a year where we haven't had anything that I would say is out of the ordinary. So I would be curious on that one. And other than that, the only other concern I have, again, is it seems to me we're having lots of people roaming around at nights lately. And I see lots of different things going missing from people's yards. And, you know, I'm glad to see a lot of people have cameras these days and can get pictures and, you know, post the pictures of these people that are doing it, because it seems like it's the same people over and over. And even the other day, they stole the dog from somebody's place that was handicapped. So, you know, they're starting to get, to me, a little bit crossing the line a little too far. So I would want people to be aware of and make sure they take pictures, and if something's looking odd around their community, make sure that you know, they phone when they can, and let's see if we can curb this, because it seems to me it's on the upswing for sure.
All right, thank you. I haven't read anything on the blue-green algae in Wood Lake, but somebody suggested shortly after the boat burned in Holiday Park that Wood Lake became strange, and wondered if firefighting foam or whatever might have got into Vernon Creek right there and caused some of that disruption in Wood Lake. I don't know. I haven't seen anything scientific on any of that. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to say thank you to staff and the Walk Around Lake Country group for the work that's going on the Coral Beach North access and improving it from, quite frankly, what was a pretty treacherous route down there to something that's way more accessible and includes handrails. I do hope we can do something around the quality of the road surface there, which would be a plea to our engineering team to throw a bit of that nice blacktop down. And also thank you to all the pothole filling that's happened along the top end of Cars Landing Road. We still have a big issue, which I've written to staff about and council around the quality of the road for cyclists, and I would love to see something if we could improve that along Cars Landing Road. And my final plea is for the motorbikes that were out on the weekend, if they could avoid gunning it up Cars Landing Hill. That would be really appreciated by all the residents. I know it's tempting, but please, if we can keep to the speed limit, it would be much more neighbour friendly, and we would all really appreciate that, especially as we heat up towards the summer and the long weekends. So a plea out there to the motorcyclists, if you could. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scow.
Hello. It's my turn to go first. You ignored me.
Yep.
Stop
We'll
doing
carry
that, will you? So anyway, I don't really have a great deal of concern, except for when I drive to work and drive home every day, I look at the ponds beside Glenmore Road. and I'm really concerned that Glenmore Road is in jeopardy. We have about 6 inches there, I would say.
Really?
And I wonder, James, through the region or through the city of Kelowna, we talked about part of the problem being maybe some construction in Lake Country, but I wonder if just that massive dump replacing what used to be the largest water body in that valley, I wonder if that hasn't contributed to the expanded size of Roberts Lake and the expanded size of those two ponds. Roberts Lake now consumes private property, quite a lot of it, as well as our park. So that's how much bigger Roberts Lake is than it used to be. So I'm just worried that our infrastructure, a major piece of infrastructure, Glenmore Road, could be in jeopardy.
It's certainly full, and that water has to go somewhere. But and the landfill.
Trouble is, we're downhill.
Not entirely, because we don't get Roberts Lake. That runs down to Mill Creek, but we get everything.
Downhill from one of those lakes.
Yeah, from the we get the unnamed, this most southern pond comes down through the Glenmore, and
it had the name. They called it Knopf Pond.
No, Knopf Pond's up by Jackson.
That's a bigger one. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was just I'm just very concerned for Glenmore Road.
Yeah, there's drainage action into there and no drainage out. But anyway, Councillor Koza, you're up. Jeremy.
Thank you, folks. Yeah, no, I wanted to continue on Councillor Mackenzie's comments there about crime and our community. Yes, it's rising and stuff like that. The one thing that he did talk about, the dog getting stolen, I'm not sure if Councillor Scarrow or Councillor Gamble or Mayor Baker know Wayne Hubbard, but he's a little bit older than me, and the poor gentleman is in a wheelchair raising 2 young boys, and he's got a couple Boston Terriers as well, and someone came and took one of his terriers. But the reason I'm bringing all this up is because the positive note is the lady's picture and truck was blasted all over Facebook, and the dog was returned yesterday, so he's got his pooch back. So I wanted to say there's a silver lining to these things, and that's one of them. And Todd said about the algal bloom on Woods Lake. I didn't know if there's any staff members that wanted to comment. I thought maybe Greg, if he's still out there, might want to say something. I'm not officially. Lots of people have been asking me because they figure I'm the water guy, but I'm the water cleaner guy. I'm not the water biologist guy. Although I do have a great background in it, but I don't want to jump in there and spill my mouth if I'm just speaking of just only. But I see Matthew Salmon up there now.
Matthew jumped in there. Do you know anything about the algae?
Yes, I know that our water department or utility department were looking at it last week, and I believe they were going to send one of the quality personnel out there to go and test it, and also maybe speak to Flynn Rose, obviously being a pure provincial jurisdiction. So we can provide the update to council maybe on the Friday update as to where that's landing.
Okay. That's the worst that I've seen it. Sorry, Jeremy. That's the worst I've seen it the whole time, and I'm walking around there a couple times a day. So it is getting worse. So whatever's causing it, it would be nice if we can try and figure it out.
I haven't actually crunched the numbers, and like I say, I'm not a biologist by any stretch of the imagination, but I did Google and bring it up here, and I knew it predominantly in my head. And I think it's just personally, and I don't want to go on the record as saying that because I don't want anyone to take me to task because I could be wrong, but I think it's just the perfect storm for a algal bloom. We've had beautiful, bright, sunshiny days. We've had a bit of cloud, but for the most part, we've had beautiful sunshine days. And when I brought it up online just to have proof of it, what it has the cyanobacteria algal bloom is light availability, water temperature, alteration of water flow, vertical mixing, and pH changes. So any of these can add to it. So there's been tremendous amounts of days of beautiful sunshine. I could be wrong, but I don't think the freshet has really kicked in So we haven't had a flush of water through the lakes yet, of cold water. So the water that is in the lake could be warmer. And I don't know, it's hard to tell if the lake's mixed because when you look at it, it looks like a soup. So I just think we're in a perfect storm, but you didn't hear that from me. Thank you.
Thank you. That about right, Matthew? All of those conditions lead to it, and certainly it's not something you want to go swimming in or let your animals go swimming.
Oh, sorry. And well, the other thing I'd like to say too is that people have been saying it's sewage and stuff. And if anything, we've been expanding our sewage system and we've been putting more and more on the sewage system. So there's been less going into the ground. So if it's sewage, it's
not from us.
It's not from us. It's from Vernon. Made its way upstream. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right. Councillor Gamble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just want to let people know that I recall in the I think it was the late 70s, there was a bloom, an algae bloom that was far, far bigger than what we see. And it was just, it looked to me almost like the whole lake went this dark green color. And we were pumping out of that lake for our irrigation. It was a real challenge that year. So I certainly hope it doesn't get that bad this year. Now, a couple of items I wanted to bring up. I was driving with my granddaughter. She was actually driving, and Matthew is here still, I believe, so I'm glad he is. We came down MP Williams Hill from Oyama, going to go onto Lodge. Somebody came up from Woodsdale Road turning left. It was very frightening to me. Because they pulled right in front of us, and they did not have a stop sign. They did not have a stop. I thought they did there. We used to have, and I'm just shocked at how dangerous that appeared to me. I don't know if you've seen many accidents there. I know it was supposedly improved, but it certainly doesn't look very safe to me. I was shocked. I hadn't really been down there since the work has been removed and finished. But anyways, I just raise it. It frightened me, and I bet you it frightens a few people. So I hope we have a good look at that, whether or not that is maybe the safest design. Just bring it up because sometimes we think we're improving something and maybe it isn't an improvement.
I don't know.
So the other issue that I had a phone call about this recently about the Airbnb rentals, which in some parts of our community are going rampant, and neighbors of those Airbnbs are commenting on things like the lack of parking, because oftentimes the Airbnbs are on very steep properties with virtually no parking on site. So the cars tend to be parked down on the roads. And we have, I think, a bylaw that requires a business license, but we have really done very little to enforce those things. And I think people are just questioning whether or not we should look at that bylaw and consider whether or not we need to do some enforcement of it, because it is changing the neighborhoods quite a bit. So I wanted to bring it up because you know, I had a phone call about it, and I know I've heard from different people of the community that they have concerns about those things. So whether that might be a topic for a strategy session, you know, along with some other items, I would suggest that would be a good idea.
Raina, are you still there? What is the short-term rentals bylaw? It doesn't have a lot of material in it. Are you there?
Mr. Mayor? Yes. Just getting the camera and mic back on.
Put you on the spot.
We can certainly, I am planning to come to council in May with some bylaw enforcement topics. So looking at setting some priorities, council priorities for proactive enforcement, including education in the communities. Regarding the bylaw itself, that would, and maybe that would come out of the discussion, whether council's looking at amending or investigating that bylaw. But I will be bringing forward a list of enforcement topics for council's discussion.
Great.
Okay, very good.
That's great. Thanks.
Councillor Ireland, I'll give you my slot.
Yeah, just in line with that, I've had a number of calls and well, more than a number of calls. That's probably the second topic I get talked about on my walks every day about these Airbnbs. And yeah, I actually have spoken to Raina about it and strategizing how we could, now that we've got a bit more of a bylaw department, how we could attack this situation, because our present bylaw does deal with roughly 70% of the ones that are in my neighborhood.
Good.
It actually addresses them because our present bylaw says you have to live in the property. And these ones that are causing the problems in our neighborhood, they're not being lived in. And, and one very large house that just got purchased is, for all intents and purposes, they're turning them into hotels.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. And that's all of the business. So we are adjourned. And good night. And
good night all.
Welcome in